The pursuit of greatness begins at first light and never, ever ends. Time is the enemy, the ally, and the holy grail of every race car driver. Who will be victorious? Only time will tell. Let's go.
Every January, drivers from across the globe make the long trek to the Sunshine State, to the high banks of Daytona, for the traditional start to the major racing calendar year. The stories it's 31 degrees of bacon could tell are massive. It was here last year where preseason championship favorite Dallas Pataska would end up scoring only his one win of the season, where a new partnership between Grizzly Motorsports and Torque Freak Racing led to celebrations with David Berklow, and where Bombshell Motorsports would start its path to a pro team title with Kurt Crum leading the way. Who will write the next chapter to their stories of this 52-year-old facility? And better yet, who will begin their quest for the Mario Andretti driver's title off in glory? We're about to find out on the Global Sim Racing channel, as we say hello everyone and welcome to the virtual Daytona International Speedway for the first race of the major series in the European region season. It's the Daytona 2.4. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth today is Peter McKay, along with all-time major series wins leader Christian Challoner. Behind the scenes is our director Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. This track has a lot of history, to say the very least. Let's learn some of that today with our GSRC track guide for Daytona International Speedway.
Welcome to the Daytona International Speedway. While many oval fans associate this Central Florida track with mainly NASCAR, the road course has gained just as much worldwide fame thanks to it hosting motorcycles and sports cars for decades. In fact, the flagship road race, the 24 Hours of Daytona, has become a major draw for drivers of all disciplines, many eager to have a go at endurance racing. The stats make this place sound relatively simple, with 12 corners on the regular road circuit and 14 on the NASCAR version, both spread amongst 3.5 miles. Indeed, a majority of the lap is spent on the oval portion, where you fly along the notoriously steep banking. But it's easy to underestimate the challenge presented to the drivers. The infield portion begins with the scary kinked entry of Turn 1. Not only is it the fastest part of the track, but the transition from the banking to the flat tends to upset the car as you slow it down. There's also the bus stop chicane on the backstretch. Added in the 80s, this is a tricky piece of circuit that punishes a poor exit severely, with it leading back into the latter half of the oval. As you'd expect, the long periods on throttle mean that drafting tends to play a factor in the racing. It also means passing isn't usually too great of an issue if you have the pace to catch someone. The more difficult thing is managing to gap your opponent so that they don't ride in your slipstream once you get by. With half a century of endurance racing collected among these walls, it's not unfair to say that road racers have just as much claim to call Daytona home. Fans who come to watch certainly won't be disappointed by the high speeds and fantastic thrills it invariably provides each year.
That was a look at our GSRC track guide for Daytona International Speedway. Now, what's bringing my partner for tonight, one of my partners rather, in Peter Mackay, as we get ready to go racing Daytona. A lot of history here, as talked about. Peter, your expectations for these competitors today as they get ready to go racing for 2.4 hours.
Well, thank you, Justin. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Daytona International Speedway is a place that's actually very close to my heart. I was able to visit the facility a year ago for the Rolex 24-hour at Daytona, and it's one of the most incredible race events you're ever likely to go to. We're going to use a very similar set of cars that they use in that particular race. We've got the LMP2 prototype made by Dallara in Italy. We have a whole suite of GTE cars from BMW, Corvette, Ferrari and Porsche. And in the GT3 class, we have two brand new cars, the Lamborghini Huracan and the BMW M4 GT3 prototype. And here at Daytona, well, the main thing is traffic management, as is always the case in multi-class sports car racing, but being able to manage the traffic correctly and avoid the incidents, that is the main thing. And from what we're hearing, the GT3 runners at least are going to be able to do the whole race on one set of tyres, so not working the tyre too hard and making it last the whole way is going to be critical.
It's going to be very critical, especially around this 3.56 mile facility. 12 turns anti-clockwise your direction as well. Green flag time in sim will be approximately 5:10 p.m. for today's action as well. The best passing opportunities as well will be in the horseshoes, as well as, if you're daring so, in the bus stop. These drivers as well are looking to prepare for what's expected to be a very competitive 2021 campaign. 2020 was also very competitive, where it was on the pro side. Revered coming away with the championship with 103 points over Ross Banfield. Riley Thompson, Joshua with Kirk Crum ended up being your top 5 in the point standing, separated by 651 points last season for the driver's title on the pro division side. Dallas Pataska finished in 6th in that title race with Brock, Baker, Mickey, and Henderson your top 10 on that side. Some of the drivers from the sportsman's class will be seen today as well, moving up the ranks, including Sam Harper, who won the Sportsman Championship last year by 420 points, with a nice 8 victories on the season. Joseph Holman and Jan Brodny were your top 3 in those standings. Redeker, Mason Martzov, Sam Watley, Stuart Elder, Scott Kukaz, Lama Lawn among your top 9 competitors. 8 victories, as mentioned, for Harper, a dominant stretch for him on that campaign. Now the question is going to be, though, how drivers react in race in 2021, Christian, as these competitors get ready for what's expected to be a big stretch of races for these drivers today. Let's take a look at our details for today.
Yeah, so a 2.4 hour race, 145 minutes today. They do have one spare car, so if there is one incident, they do get one kind of freebie to have another go at it. I don't suspect that we're going to see anybody in the GT classes, both GTE and GT3, actually changing tires today. With the race being so late in the afternoon, the temperature is pretty low, so that's a little easier for them. But at the same time, some guys might struggle a little bit towards the very end of the race, so we'll have to watch out for that. Obviously 3 classes as well, so there's a lot of traffic, and that's going to be difficult, especially for prototype drivers to make their way through. And it's going to be probably around about 90 to 93 laps, depending on when our leader crosses the line.
We'll see how things fare out. 90 laps was that mark for the international side in the pro division. These drivers currently in the midst of their final practice for today at the moment, as these competitors see track conditions at the moment mostly cloudy skies. 75 degrees is the air temp, 74 degrees is the current track temp. Flip that around rather, with the winds currently gusting to the north at approximately 6 miles an hour or so. 54% humidity. In sim day is January 17th, 2021. And Peter, today expected to be a very competitive race for all these organizations, especially with drivers like Andrei Rajkovic, who was the quickest driver in pre-qualifying in the field.
Yeah, as you can see, he's running in the P2 class, running for the Huisking-Veld team, the manufacturer of very, very fancy pedal equipment for your sim rig, and looking pretty tidy here in this qualifying practice session right now, keeping it. Oh, I just showed you there, just a little bit of a wiggle when he's asking for the power. This Dallara P2, the naturally aspirated V8 built by Gibson in Derbyshire in England, and it's got a lot of power and a lot of torque, and when you ask for the power that little bit too early, it will let you know. It's got quite the Latin temperament. It is Italian after all, though.
Indeed, and He's been working on this car for a good past few days in preparation for what's expected to be a very competitive January, to say the very least. But it's also expected to be a competitive race, as talked about Christian. It's the chance to make history. It's the chance to get momentum today, and the chance, in some cases, to have redemption from struggles that happened for your organizations last season. As these drivers getting ready, hear your thoughts on the brand new season, Christian, here, and the chance for drivers and teams to come off in a way with a great start today.
I think it's one of those races where there's always a lot of build-up for it. Obviously, it tends to be the beginning of everyone's season, really, regardless of what you race. So there's a lot of practice time that goes into this event, and I kind of think that builds a lot of expectation as well. Obviously, drivers have been practicing for pretty much a number of weeks, really, for 2.4 hours today and also 24-hour next weekend. So I think this is probably one of the races where you see people turning up with the most sorted cars, sorted setups, and also they have the best idea in terms of race strategy as well. I think there's a couple of drivers to watch out for. Obviously, you see Joshua Wolf is always good in prototypes, and Dallas Pataska as well tends to be pretty fast in prototypes, but can be prone to kind of getting flustered a little bit in the races, and that can go against him. So I expect a pretty tight fight at the front of the LMP1 field, and to be honest, throughout really all the classes, everybody's really close in terms of lap time. So it's gonna come down to who executes the best race.
Especially since there's a lot of teams throughout the field today that we're expecting to see speed with. We've seen Missed Apex, for example, one of the rising teams of 2020, especially in the second half of the campaign, to see how they do. The Grizzly TFR partnership is continuing for this season. That is Grizzly Motorsports and Torque Freak Racing. That led to success in 2020. They're working together once more. UDocs has seen a new rebrand. V-Apex is bringing in some different marks. There are a lot of different teams changing things up this season, Peter, but also many that are looking to repeat the same formulas as 2020 for success.
Absolutely, and here in the major series, of course, the adaptability from class to class, car to car, track to track is very, very important, and really shows you who is the kind of ultimate sim racing driver, really, being able to adapt from machine to machine, because you do see a lot of drivers on the iRacing platform who do tend to lean towards one particular car and specialize in it, but you can't afford to here in the majors series. Got a couple of friends of the GSRC crew here. We've got Ryan Walker, the other half of Double Scotch, my fellow commentator in the Grand Prix Legends series we have here on the Global Sim Racing channels on Saturdays. Ryan's second fastest in the GT3 category in his Lamborghini at the moment. There he is, going around the high banks, and also Richie Hearn, who commentates with us in the Lionheart series as well, and currently sitting 6th right now, and that is a very, very nice looking car there. I like the paint scheme there, very nice.
Yeah, a lot of experience in the field, to say the very least, Christian. You mentioned drivers like Dallas Pataska, who is currently the quickest in prototype. We have drivers like Joshua Wolf returning, Andrei Rajkovic, the real world drivers we mentioned, or the broadcast commentators with experience. Who else are you keeping an eye on today, especially with the amount of talent in this field returning?
Well, I think looking down at GTE class, I think you got to keep an eye on Tim Claessens. I've had some pretty good battles with him over the couple of years in this series, and I know when he turns up, he's always a force to be reckoned with. So he's a guy I'm looking out for. Pete Harrod as well is always pretty fast, and he's going to be hopefully pretty close to Tim in that class. Moving down to GT3 class, Eric Mickey's always very fast, so have to keep an eye on him. But Ryan Walker's actually pretty close to him right now, within 2/10, so looks like we could have a pretty good battle, realistically, in all classes, I think.
Absolutely, and keep in mind, with that class, Christian, brand new race cars for the iRacing service in that grouping. It's going to be interesting how those drivers run in those new cars.
Yeah, so this is the thing. With the GT3 cars, obviously, the new additions to the class is the Lamborghini Huracan as well as the M4 GT3. And they're the new cars, so to speak. But really, that entire class can honestly be considered new at this point. It was given a whole new tire, it was given a whole new aero model. Really, every single car in that class has been given a complete overhaul, so it's still quite unknown, I think, to people. Obviously, Season 1's been running for quite a while in the official iRacing season so far, so guys have had a decent amount of time to acclimatize to them, but I don't think anybody's really raced any of those cars at a track such as Daytona, which is a bit of an outlier. There was the Nürburgring in the official series, but still, it's going to be quite different, I think, to what maybe they experienced last year. and from my perspective, it's definitely a very fun class right now, and I feel that those two cars are very, very evenly matched. One thing to keep in mind is that the Lamborghini is ever so slightly a little bit better on fuel around this racetrack, so I suspect that we'll see them save maybe 1 to 1.5 seconds in the pit stops over the course of the race. So there could be some interesting strategy battles there.
Yeah, that's going to be something drivers, especially if they did their homework, going to have to be prepared for today. As drivers have wrapped up final practice, drivers will now move into qualifying for today's action. 10 minutes, 4 laps solo for these competitors to try and set the best times to be able to be at the front of the field. And Peter, how big is qualifying going to be to start off this campaign?
Well, it is it's critical, really, at Daytona to get a good grid spot, get as high up your class as you possibly can as well. It is 2.4 hours might sound a lot, but in a field as competitive as this, not necessarily so. So we'll see the obviously the prototypes. They're going to be laying down the quick times. They'll be running on, these cars really come alive when they're on low fuel as well. We're going to see brand new tires, low fuel, and we're going to see who has got the absolute ultimate pace. And of course, 4 laps here is a good chance to get the tires up to full working temperature and have a good go and be able to push all out, because here at Daytona there's a couple of points on the circuit where you've really got to watch out for track limit penalties, or track limits warnings, if you like. One of them is the bus stop chicane, which Eric Mika is just about to come up to there in his BMW M4, and on the particularly on the entry and then the exit of that bus stop chicane, you've really got to be careful to not abuse the track limits, because if you do, your lap will be invalidated. Not such an issue in the race, not necessarily, but here in qualifying, laps invalidated, you've got to go around and do another one. So that's certainly where the driver's going to have to be careful in this particular session. But watch out for the Lamborghinis. It might be that the Lamborghinis might just have the slight edge. Certainly in the real world they have. In fact, the Lamborghini Huracan has won the class at the Rolex 24-hour at Daytona for the last 3 years, and in 2020 was the Paul Miller Racing team with Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, Corey Lewis winning that particular race.
It's going to be interesting, absolutely, with that in mind. As taking a look at Andrei Rechkovic, we'll see how he does today in this 99. His quickest time in pre-qualifying was half a second quicker than the rest of the field, Christian, in the prototype.
Yeah, and really to just continue on with how critical qualifying is around the circuit. Obviously, it's quite a, well, I say it's quite a long race, but realistically now, you really don't think of a 2.4-hour race as being all that long. But the big area that I think is always difficult in this racetrack is actually turn 1, because you always want to push the corner as much as possible to try and get that good start to the lap. But there's so much that you can do there just to get it wrong, which sounds so strange, but the line is very, very narrow actually. So the track drops away off to the right side very, very steeply. So if you end up running wide a little bit, it's very, very damaging to the lap time, because you just struggle to get the car turned in and then get on the power and get out of that corner. But on the other hand, if you run it too close to the inside, you're making the whole corner tighter, and again you're struggling to get out of it. So it's really, really tricky, and it's more about not making a mistake through there than it is gaining any time. And I think that's also true for other corners around the track as well, such as the bus stop. You can lose a lot of time there. You can't really gain a lot of time, and obviously you've got to watch out for the track boundaries, because it's very, very easy to pick up a 1X at those locations as well.
First times are coming in. The current quick time for the prototype is Dallas Bataska's 132.5. He's already pulled off the racetrack and reset to go for another run. Andrei Rechkovic, a 133.2. Then the top drivers at the moment, Ross Banfield in his Corvette, followed by Tim Claeson's Ray Partridge. Ryan Mayer has also bumped his way to second at the moment. Also at the moment, Eric Mickey is currently leading his GT3 class at the moment over Sam Harper. These times going to come in quick and fast around this racetrack, to say the very least. Right now, we're expecting drivers, especially their third laps, to be some of the quickest times, Peter, potentially today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just get that last bit of fuel burned off and the tyres up to their absolute optimum temperature at the moment. In the GTE class, it's looking like the Corvettes are really, really fast. The top 5, 4 of them are Corvettes at this particular stage. So looks like the C8R, the naturally aspirated V8 in the back of that car, powering nicely on the high banks of Daytona. Of course, we saw that car debuted in IMSA last year. Didn't win at the Rolex 24 in its debut, came 4th, but did set that right in the Daytona 240 on Labor Day weekend. Sorry, Independence Day, my apologies.
Yes. Reg Kovic actually lost some time on the second lap around. We'll see how he is on the third lap. Riley Thompson's bumped him to second. Cordell Cologne, we're taking a look with one of the Grizzly TFR Le Mans drivers. They have 2 different rosters of drivers for this event today. They have Grizzly TFR Daytona, which features Joshua Wolf, Dawson Brock, David Baker, Travis Henderson, Tim Plaisance, and then they have Grizzly TFR Le Mans, which was for Brodsky, David Mawernich, Cologne, George Gruber, David Barraclough for their respective groupings. So keep an eye on those drivers today as we take a look at one of the drivers who had some good speed, especially in some of the oval races. Marcus Romner, a 1:33.6 gets him up to 8th in his class.
Yep, we're just seeing some of the hotter times coming in now in GTE. It's still Ross Banfield sitting atop the field with Tim Claessens making it a Corvette 1-2 at this stage. Ryan Mayer in the 915 Porsche 911 RSR in 3rd. Pete Harrod goes 4th, also in a Porsche. So now we've got a bit more of a split. Some of the Porsches getting up there, and it's arguably been the car to have in the GTLM category over the last few weeks, but recently been given a 5 kilogram BOP adjustment with weight added to slow it down slightly.
Yeah, and those BOP adjustments going to be very critical. The balance of power, for those who don't know the short form for that, essentially for BOP. We're taking a look on board with as he tries to bump this time a bit slower by a couple tenths of a second for the number 69 machine. Currently scored inside the top 10, Richie Hearn as well, coming across the stripe to get up to 9th position so far. And these times coming very quickly in Christian. 4 drivers yet to set times of note. Dawson Bronco is at incident points on several of his laps. Ryan Walker's on his first lap. Russell Clausen, who has not hit the racetrack. Those are the only drivers who have not yet set times today. Christian, your opinion on the qualifying so far?
I think it's extremely close, and something that we haven't actually mentioned up until this point is how powerful the draft effect is around a racetrack like this. And so this is the thing, right? At the moment, we've got Eric Mickey's around a 44.262 in GT3 to take the pole, and Trevor Vovrosky's just under 2 tenths behind him with a 44.448. But the thing is, with the draft, really that's going to equalize them out. And so this is a race where there's an opportunity for drivers who maybe are, I don't want to say lacking in pace, but maybe aren't able to hit that ultimate time, might actually be able to compete for a win, so long as they can stay within the kind of draft of the class leader. And also you can save a little bit of fuel as well, so you can kind of play a strategy angle if maybe you don't have the raw pace to get it done. But that's where, in traffic situations, it becomes really, really critical to not get broken up. So if you're the class leader, your goal in, say, GT or GT3 is always to get a prototype in between you somehow. So, say, coming down to a horseshoe, if you see the prototype go to the inside of the guy behind you, you really always do want to kind of close the door and get that prototype in between you, because then that gives you maybe about 0.5, 0.6 of a second to just have an opportunity to maybe break out of that draft zone. It's really, really difficult to do, but it's one of those cases where we always talk about how the prototypes are working their way through traffic, but there's things that GT drivers can do as well to not necessarily gain in a conventional sense in traffic, but definitely in a strategic sense.
Absolutely. Seeing as Cordell Cologne coming across the stripe a couple 100ths. Check that couple tenths slower than his previous best time. Ray Partridge so looking to come across the stripe of note. Second in prototypes has changed. That has seen Mike Dinesen bumping his way up to second spot on that side of the garage in one of the TechSense cars. Well, the Hanson brothers have a brand new look this season, deep in the field though in their respective class here. And as Ryan Walker comes across the stripe here, keep in mind as well, Peter, Interested to see what Ryan can do here in the race car. How about P2 now on the board for him here in this session? You've had a lot of experience with him. Your thoughts on what Ryan can do today in race trim?
Well, Ryan's he's got a wise head on his shoulders. That's for sure. I mean, he's always very modest, is Ryan. He was saying that he was expecting to be running in maybe the 45s, possibly the 146s in the race, but qualifying he's in the low 144s. So that's a good sign for just over a tenth off the overall pole. And Ryan understands that it's a long race, and watch him in the GT3 category. My fellow Scotsman up in Grangemouth, not that far away from where I'm sitting right now, about 20 miles or so.
Very interesting. You didn't know how close you guys were in the past, but still, though, drivers have finished up qualifying. All drivers have completed their respective laps, and that means one thing. It's time for the starting grid for the Daytona 2.4 to begin the 2021 Major Series European Region season. Let's take a look at your starting grid. First is your prototype class. It's Dallas Pataska on the pole by 0.3 of a second over Mike Thieneson. Then it's Riley Thompson in row 2 who will start alongside Yudas Buteklis with Joshua Wolf in 5th. Yelva Verde will start in 6th today with Andrei Brechkovic in traffic in 7th. One of the big free agent signings for Grizzly Motorsports, David Molernich, will start in 8th position with Marcus Romner in 9th. Travis Henderson rounds out the top 10 starting positions in the class. Richie Hearn will start at 11th with David Barraclough moving over to this class after his victory last year in the GTEs, where it will be Dawson Brock behind him with Shane Norden. George Gruber will start alongside Ettore Sainz Galindo with Henry Bennett starting 17th. Colin Martzoff starts in 18th position. 19th is Mike Golightly with Tom Dreiling in 20th. Brian Barney rounds out the class. Peter, over to you as these drivers get ready in their GTEs as well.
Yeah, certainly a busy field of prototypes. A little bit more condensed in the GTE category. Ross Banfield on pole position in his Corvette C8R, followed by Tim Claessens in the same car. Ryan Mehrer will start 24th, followed by Pete Harrod, Dick Mueller, my apologies, that's a habit. Kurt Kroom will start from 27th with Ray Partridge 28th, and Darwin Mentz and Rob Gall will start 29th and 30th. And finally, Franco Scuri rounds out our GTE runners.
Moving on to GT3, only 10 cars in the class, but actually the closest class with only a second covering the entire group. So Eric Mickey had the pole with a 262, with Ryan Walker not too far behind with a 404. Trevor Bobrovsky actually lost that second position right at the death of qualifying and winds up in 3rd with David Baker alongside him in 4th. Sam Harper, a driver from Sportsman, moving up, is in 5th with Cordell Colon in 6th. Marcus Akarech in 7th with Marcus Niskasen in 8th, and Claude Bevel and Bob Beltrami, actually a driver from the Americas region, moving over to Europe, lines up in town.
Let's look at your starters for today's actions. They now get rolling through the bus stop for today's action. The charity for today's Daytona 2.4 is the Wounded Warrior Project. To donate, go to woundedwarriorproject.org. These competitors all set to get rolling here at the virtual Daytona International Speedway. We'll see how things fare out for this one. As Peter, your thoughts as we race for a good cause and race for a start of a new season.
Absolutely, a fantastic cause indeed. I think the big story is just going to be how outnumbered the GT cars are with the prototypes. You've got to watch. There's going to be a constant flow of prototypes in this race, and it's just keeping an eye out for them. There's such a speed difference. Prototypes are touching nearly 200 miles an hour at certain points on the high bank, so got to watch out for those.
Drivers all set to go racing. The prototypes will lead us to the green flag. The 2021 Major Series season is underway for the European region. And Dallas Pataska with a big launch into turn 1. Riley Thompson under attack on the outside quickly. Several drivers locking up the brakes, while the rest of the classes try and get themselves into turn 1. Off and away go the GTEs with a clean launch, 3 wide into the corner.
Here they go then, the GTEs, all just Corvettes and Porsche 911 RSRs. No takers.
Oh, trouble in your prototypes.
Oh.
Travis Henderson also around in some trouble. Valverde, one of your championship contenders last season, was already put into the tire wall. That's caused checkups in the GTEs.
Yeah, well done from all the GTEs there. Oh, there's a bit of a problem. We've got one of the Porsches off on the grass just after the International Horseshoe. The Corvettes are away cleanly at the front, but got to be careful in those GTEs in the early laps. There's no ABS on those cars, so when the tyres and brakes are cold, you've got to let them bed in, but the leading prototypes already onto the high banks.
This is all about the GT3s, Christian. In comparison's sakes, have had a somewhat calmer start, with Eric Mickey pulling off and away by a couple seconds. They do have respective cars, though, separating them who are involved in some of the incidents, all while the prototypes still run their way to the bus stop.
Yeah, Eric Mickey has done exactly what I was suggesting that the leader should do, and that's to try and get a car in between himself and to get a gap, and he's already out of draft range of second place. So really, he's got a great start and got this under control. Obviously, he's got that RSR behind him that's going to try and repass, but the thing is, he can use that to actually draft away from the rest of the class.
Looking up towards the front end of the first lap, Dallas Pataska leads by a couple of car lengths over Mike Thieneson as he tries to pull off and away from Protectless and Company at the moment. But let's take a look at some of the air drivers where right now Ross Banfield trying to hold on to his class lead, and keep in mind some of the prototypes are going to be in the mix of all this where they were involved in some of those first lap incidents. Valverde has already had to come in and use one of his fast repairs, his only fast repair in fact, Peter. That's going to be interesting for the traffic for these GTEs today.
Absolutely, yeah, and really, really tight at the top of the GTE field, and we can expect that throughout the race. Banfield and Clayton's in the Corvette, and Pete Harrod in the leading Porsche, all 1, 2, 3 really close together. There they are as they come down towards the King. Really, really fast, completely flat out through there. And then you got to lean on the brakes hard to try and get it turned in for the West Horseshoe, and then up towards the left-hander to go onto the high banks. But the Corvette's looking pretty tidy so far. Of course, Corvette Racing and its current guys actually debuted here at the Rolex 24 Hour at Daytona with Chris Neifel and the late great John Paul Jr.
Let's take a look back at the LMP2s at the moment, where Pataska's still up at the front, and taking a look now from second place. The draft, we talked about this, Christian, going to be so big today, but Pataska already has nearly broken it away in some of these sections. The top two have broken away from third on back already.
Yeah, and this is a case where both the leader and second place can work together here to get away. As you say, they've got a nice gap actually right now, but if they fight, then obviously they'll lose that gap and the entire class will group back up. One thing that we haven't mentioned actually is the power reduction on the P2s, and I've heard from a couple of drivers that's actually made passing a little bit easier for the cars, a little bit more drag limited down the front stretch. So they're finding that it's actually a little bit easier to get by each other than it was previously. So that's obviously going against the class leader in a sense, but it should actually make the racing a bit more exciting for us.
Absolutely, and keep in mind that's with the railroad rule regulations and changes. As we take a look at the GTEs once again for the race lead for them, Ross Banfield still holding on for the time being inside the horseshoes. Tim Playson still in second spot. Peter Rod rounding out the top three at the moment, all bumper to bumper. They pulled away from the rest of the pack by at least a couple seconds.
Yeah, they're really making a big move forward, riding on board on the front bumper of Pete Harrod in his Porsche 911 RSR 17. Beautiful sounding machine, this high-pitched, wailing flat six motor, actually mounted slightly further forward than the usual rear position of a 911, actually in the middle of the car. So if you can get as close as you can to a prototype in a GT, this is it. But we're going to get a good idea here of what sort of speed the drivers have out on the high banks. Pete Harrod in the draft, but these vets have got some ponies on the high bank, on the speedway sections to go through the bus stop, but the Porsche's always got good off-corner traction, and there you go. You can see him just pull in a little bit there, coming through the bus stop, but Pete Harrod's in a good spot here. If you can spend most of the initial stint in the draft with the leaders, you get pulled along, you don't have to do as much hard work, and don't forget, of course, we expect the drivers to go the whole distance on one set of tyres, so not having to do the hard work at the front could be an advantage later on.
Absolutely, as they still stay tucked in line and continue to try and save a little bit. And eventually, Christian, of course, in this type of race, you have to keep in mind with the couple pit stops in line, How long do you decide, okay, I'm going to save and just tuck in line before eventually you say, okay, it's time to go and see if I can get a push for a run?
Well, I think it comes down to track position. Obviously, in this sense, if you're sticking with the leader, I don't think that you ever really go until. So, say if you're trying to extend by 1 lap, you don't go until you absolutely know that if you make a move and then you're the leader, that you're going to be able to run that extra lap. Otherwise, I would just sit. I mean, even the entire run potentially to just save that extra lap of fuel, because it will pay off. It's less time in the pit stop, either right there and then or in the last stop of the race when you're coming in for that splash of dash.
Keep in mind the battle for 4th position for this class as well is going to have to deal with some of the LMP2 traffic coming in from those earlier incidents. That's Valverde driving right on by and lost him a little bit more time. Let's talk a bit about the traffic, Peter, especially with the faster classes coming towards the other classes today, with a difference of upwards of 12 seconds for some of these drivers today. How tricky do you feel it's going to be in the span of these 2.4 hours?
Well, yeah, it's going to be very hard. I mean, there's going to be a little bit of luck involved, as there always is in multi-class sports car racing. Daytona's a little bit different. In a way, it's kind of a similar idea to Le Mans in many ways, because there are long parts of the circuit which are in a straight line, and that's if you're in the prototype, if you're in the faster class, you can really try and get as many moves done as you possibly can. When we get to the more technical parts of the circuit, like the International Horseshoe and the West Horseshoe, that's actually where this prototype, this Dallara P2, is kind of really unhappy at low speeds. It can understeer, it can oversteer, it can be really quite unhappy indeed, and that's where the GT cars really come into their own. For example, in braking, the GT3 car actually is really, really nice around the tighter sections here. So that's really when you're in a prototype, you kind of don't want to catch a GT car at that point, because that's when the pace evens out slightly.
Taking a look back towards the front end of the prototypes, and Dallas Pataska is still up at the front. Dallas Pataska, of course, very successful here, Christian, back last year in the European region, looking to try and do a repeat here today. But for him and Satellite Racing, had some great speed on some of the road courses. Just couldn't get some of the luck in a lot of the races, though, when he had winning pace in some races.
Yeah, Dallas is a driver who's always been quite aggressive in battle, and sometimes it can go against him. I think for the most part, it goes in his favor, but obviously in a championship such as this, it can go against you if you're involved in too many incidents. And realistically, he just got unlucky too many times last season. Obviously a driver that we know has the pace, and showing it again here today.
Right now, he's got some of the fastest laps on the racetrack, 1:33.7 at the moment. The fastest lap overall is set by Riley Thompson, who is hanging on to this pack, by the way. You see him right at the very edge there of the 98's draft at the moment. Riley Thompson, also quick in these prototypes, if you remember back to last year, was a top runner behind Dallas Pataska, in fact. These drivers continuing to roll their way around, just about 10 minutes or so into the action as we take a look towards some of the other trains building up. This is currently second on back GT3s at the moment, Christian, where right now Eric Mickey has ran away from these cars by upwards of 4 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Trevor Bobrovsky managed to get ahead of Ryan Walker, and really is kind of just building this huge line of cars behind him. We see actually Sam Harper made a great start and is really holding on to what is essentially a battle for second. All while this is going on, Eric Mickey is just slowly pulling away from the field. He was about 2 seconds ahead 2 laps ago, and he's managed to extend that out to about 3.3 seconds here. But nobody looks like they're ready to fight in this pack. Everybody just seems content to ride behind Trevor at this point, but it is allowing Eric to get away. And I don't know.
No.
I think at some point somebody has to try and take the lead and try and pull them back up to Eric.
Bit of trouble for one of the Bombshell Racing Team cars up the road. Of note, Ryan Mayer spun around to the West Horseshoe. He's lost several positions. One of the drivers competing in the iRacing Blood About Lost Nostra Drink Sprint Cars World Championship GTE class today, as we still follow along with the GT3s. The GTE lead, meanwhile, is still bumper to bumper, while the Corvette's still looking to scrap a little bit. It's on board here with the 451 as he tries to get the run.
Yeah, riding on board with Tim Klassen's trying to get the move done on Banfield here. The 2 Corvettes really starting to just adding a little bit of a margin from Pete Harrod in the Porsche. Now this is interesting. I think that Klassen's had the run there. He could have perhaps gone for a move, but quite happy to sit there. But you've got to really trust one another in those type of situations, especially as Christian mentioned rightly before the show. Coming into turn one, there's a lot of places where you can make mistakes, and really costly mistakes at that. You're coming from absolutely the very top of top gear, and you're slowing the car down to probably second gear for the GTEs. And you really got to be very, very careful not to collide with one another. We see it so many times there. And interestingly there, that's maybe not quite paid off for Tim Claessens. He could have maybe gone past Banfield there, backed off, and that's allowed Pete Harrod to recover and get back into the draft.
Up at the front, Riley Thompson has taken the race lead just now at the start and finish line. That's because of all this traffic. Remember that train we were just talking about with the GT3s. A bit of contact with some of these cars as David Baker drives by, and one spin around. It's Thompson. Thompson into the Armco barrier. And Riley Thompson stuck against the Armco barrier, and this is going to lose him a ton of time on the racetrack. Take a look at what happened. That was double wide traffic just about in front of him, and it's Dallas Pataska who gets in the back of him, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. That was Dallas Pataska is going to definitely get some damage from that as well. But Riley Thompson just minding his own business, and it was just getting all too busy there. But that's such a hot spot for action between the prototypes and the GT cars, because through the faster bits, the prototype really gets into a little bit of a stride there, and there's not much room. It's very narrow. And yeah, just a little bit of a car park there. So back to the GT leaders, still Banfield and Claessens back together. So Claessens just got, I think, these Corvettes definitely got a bit of an edge on the Porsche 911 RSR of Pete Harrod. Could come a little bit down to set up, but whoa, I think Claessens is now they're getting a bit impatient, JP.
Yeah, starting to really try and make some moves here on this UDOX machine. Keep in mind, they have changed a little bit of their branding for this season, where they slim down the driver's lineup and have a full commitment of the llama motif, where they embrace a lush Pantone purple hue, with the metallic Tron decals laid atop of their carbon bases for their cars this season. They also look to embrace mascots this unit, from Frank the Whale to Loa the Llama to Oliver the Cat, which is the latter for apparently crashing a post-race interview with Ross Banfield at the time for last season. So looking to go on the more fun side when it comes to Ross Banfield and his unit for this season. Right now they're having fun of the early going in this one, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for these guys in GTE right now, they look like they're fighting really hard, but I'm unsure as to whether there's any real need to. Neither of them are going to be able to get away from each other. They're not really helping each other pull away from the rest of the class either. And really, it's just going to come down to a strategy race between these two right now. Obviously, we see the RSR getting dropped a little bit in the background. And I think that really, in a race like this, these guys are just going to be stuck together the entire time. It's absolutely going to come down to that last pit stop, who comes out ahead, and if there's any opportunity to get away from one another in terms of draft. And we've kind of seen the GT3s have started to get split up a little bit after we had that incident with the LMP2 leader, sorry. And I think it's just going to continue that way throughout the rest of the race, where it's all about how traffic breaks everything up.
Right now they still have a bit of a cushion before the prototypes make their way towards them by about another 10 minutes or so, give or take, maybe 5. But the lights are now on the race cars, just like that. And keep in mind, a lot of the teams, Peter, as well, build their setups more towards the full darkness in some cases because of the track conditions they'll be facing, especially if you're, say, in tightly fought classes like this one.
Indeed, yep. Of course, we're going into the night here at Daytona. It's a little bit of a different experience than, say, the Le Mans 24 Hours, where there's large parts of the circuit which isn't lit. But here at Daytona, it's
oh, trouble! Eric Mickey, GT3 race leader's been hit by some of the prototypes. That was with the 11 car. Entor Santos Galindo got in contact with them, and the 86 had to take some of the access roads and has lost the class lead.
It's going to be extremely frustrating for him to have that. Obviously, build up a pretty big lead. I think he's about 3 seconds into the lead. But this is what can happen in multi-class racing. And I know there's always that feeling as a GT class that you're waiting to be hit And there we see that really is just not a passing point, but that is a choke point between the classes, because as we saw earlier with Dallas Pataska, it just slows everybody down. The GT3 needs all the room and all the road through that area. An LMP doesn't, but an LMP will have so much more speed at that specific moment. The LMP has to check up. There's just no question about it. The GT3 car can't alter its line through there, and it's all on the LMP car to get around it.
And that, as a result, Eric Mickey is shuffled to third. Rick Sakowicz has moved up to second, and Trevor Vobrovsky is now your current class leader. That right now is a gap of about a second plus now as a result. Mickey's not going to be too happy, to say the very least. This team, keep in mind, brand new sponsorship this season for Bombshell Racing Team from Pitbox.io and Lazy Rocket for this campaign. Hence the new look on their respective race cars, as Mickey has several more prototypes closing on in. And Peter, when you have an incident like that, how difficult is it to try and get your mind back and focus, knowing you had a big lead, you had already broken the draft, and now you have to claw your way back up again, especially with traffic coming up and quick behind you?
Well, I think in Eric Mickey's case, he's just got to remind himself that he did have that pace, and it appears like his car is relatively straight. Doesn't look like there's too much damage there, so hopefully he'll be able to continue that pace and get himself back to the front where he was previously. But yeah, as Christian explained very, very well, that is such a danger spot for contact between prototypes and GTs. That really stole a class win away for Catherine Legg a number of years ago in the Acura GT3, with again a prototype coming through and making contact. But this leading trio still glued together, and they're putting some big distance between themselves and the rest of the GTE field, about 9 seconds back to Mainz in fourth. But I think Pete Harrod in the Porsche, he's playing very, very smart. Definitely that 5 kilogram BOP adjustment has really hampered the Porsche back compared to what it was. What's amazing though, of course, last season they almost used to call this class Formula BMW with the BMW M8, but no takers for that car, so definitely an adjustment there. And that's how it works in GT racing. You have some days in the sun and some days you don't. But so we look back at P3 in the GT3 class, Ryan Walker in there, and he's got the full endurance lights on the front of that Lamborghini.
Yeah, that's currently fourth, rather, in the battle for now for third. And here's the interesting mark, Christian. We've seen a lot of fuel saving in the GTEs. Do you expect with these cars here to do the same now and just ride on behind, or do they try and take advantage of Mickey in his situation?
Well, it's about 31 and a quarter laps running on your own in a GT3 car. So if you're able to save a little bit, I can see drivers being able to get out to 32 laps. And I think with the Majors Series not running the official iRacing Daytona 24-hour BOP, that does make it a little bit easier for maybe a Lamborghini to stretch out to that 32 lap mark. And I really think that would be a good strategy for someone such as Ryan Walker right now. Obviously, he's got Eric Mickey in front of him. Mickey's presumably furious about what's happened and is trying to get back to the class lead, so he doesn't look like he's saving any fuel at all. But for other drivers, it's definitely an option, and that shorter last pit stop. I mean, with how close everybody is in the class right now, if you can run 1 lap longer each run, then the amount of fuel that you're going to take on the last stop is probably going to be in the order of about 7 to 8 liters less.
Separated by just about 1 second to the cars in front at the moment. By the way, Dallas Pataska has reached the back end of your GT3 leaders fairly soon. At the moment, rather your GTE leaders, I should rather say.
That's not a big gap at all. So if you can be more smart in traffic, you can really gain on the field, or vice versa, of course, you can lose if you don't quite. It's always that balance in endurance racing. How much risk do you take? How much, how much can you do? So this is always the challenge, particularly here at Daytona, to be able to get to the top step of the podium, is managing that traffic no matter what class you're in.
What's the environment also like, though, Peter, at a race such as this, especially if you're following along with the race in person, especially as the lights go down and the track cools on down? What's it like being at this track, whether you're in, say, a driver, crew member, lanes go down, or even a fan on the grandstand? What's it like
Well, I have to say, it's an incredibly special place. If you're a fan of motorsport, it is just the size of the facility, and like you mentioned, when the sun comes down and the barbecues come out, there's a huge attendance with spectators, with RVs and camper vans, etc. And I remember one of my most vivid motor racing memories was being there 3:30 in the morning. Most people gone to bed, and is that Miki had a crash in the pit box BMW?
I believe that might have been Markus Niskanen. Yes,
Okay.
it is. Markus Niskanen in one of the BMWs. So the 47 car going around. Let's take a look at what happened here, as that was as he was trying to battle at the time with Sam Harper and Ryan Walker. Into the wall he went.
I tell you what, to have an accident there and not have any more collateral damage was very, very lucky indeed. Markus Niskanen doing a brilliant job to get the car back going and not make contact with any other drivers. Very, very, just such a shame to make just a little mistake, and quite a costly mistake, but I have to say, you've got to commend them there for getting the car going again in a safe manner.
That ended up losing him a couple spots towards the back of the field. 40th overall now on the board. So let's take a look at GTE lead once again, as now there are those prototypes. Tim Klassen's near contact. They have a little bit tight as Joshua Wolf is trying to get by these cars. Andrei Rachkovic also in this grouping as well. This is the battle for third as they're locking up the tires.
That's another bit of contact there. That's two pieces of contact from Claessens to the back of Banfield. And, well, it looked like they dropped Harrod, but now they haven't. Harrod is he's the man, I think, playing this one really, really clever. And coming back to the story there, being there in the middle of the night, of course, most of the fans are then gone to sleep by that point. However, the battle still rages on, and it's incredible. You know, if you're willing to stay up the whole way through, it's like having your own private show, your own private motor race. And at the time, the GTE battle, or the GTLM battle, I should say, at the Rolex 24 Hour in 2020 was just like this one. We had two Porsches and a BMW in that battle. Absolutely nose to tail, with Chas Mostert and Earl Bamber and Nick Tandy going absolutely hell for leather with DPI cars coming through. A little bit different cast this time, two Corvettes and a Porsche, but very much the same idea. And I think that there's going to be a little bit of heat, a little bit of tension now between Banfield and Claessens.
And Kinchlow jokingly saying, in regards to his team car, stop scratching my paints. Right now, his paint looking not really scratched up in that contact, by the way, for reference sakes. I believe he's joking either way. But either way, right now, you have to think of the fuel mileage too, where these drivers still have the 777, who's been in clean air throughout this entire run, while the Team Mad car's been the back end in this grouping this entire run so far. As well, the gap, by the way, has grown to 10 seconds to Darwin Mines and Dick Moore at the moment.
I have to say there are some very, very, very shiny and impressive paints here, and I can understand if you're the painter, you don't want these, you don't want them damaged. A good-looking Corvette here, the 83 car, and that almost like Team Advan colours there. I'm a very big fan of that one.
Now looking at one of the Dog Bear cars, trying to find at the moment. Once again, one of the Bombshell Racing Team cars. Now keep in mind, they did change up some of their lineup orderings for this season, where they moved Isaac Snyder to a junior role in particular. If you remember, Snyder ran some of the pro races back in 2020. They also lined him up with John Nichols in their respective prototypes on that respective side of this year's bracket of major series. As we look once again at the battle for third in the prototypes, Wolf and Rachkovic still trying to scrap a little bit. Rachkovic now saving a little bit in the Team Hoichenfeld cars. They still are in the midst of traffic, and they've reached the back into Markus Niskanen in all this.
Yeah, and just like you say, that choke point, perfect way to describe it. And just, I tell you what, really, really smart there from Joshua Wolf in the number 12 Dallara LMP2 there, just to take the time, just bear with it, just a second or two, just give it away to keep the car safe. And that good respect there from the drivers as Joshua Wolf comes down now through the kink to the West Horseshoe, in front of the campers, in front of all the fans normally. Very, very impressive driving there, but Andrei Rajovic doing a brilliant job as well to just keep on the case. And when you're in these prototypes, everything's just happening so much quicker. You've got to be so decisive. And these cars, they're not for everyone, are they, Christian? You've kind of got to you've got to know how to handle them, and also know how to handle them with slower traffic around you.
Pardon me here. Change for the GT3 lead. Eric Mickey has just swapped positions with Trevor Bobrovsky through the bus stop. And Christian, that was coming after 2 gain positions this lap for Mickey.
Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on that. It looks like Bobrovsky's actually going to have a run back at him into turn 1. But, yep, I suspected that Eric was going to force him to go around the outside. And actually, I feel a little bit bad for Sakowicz. He's been right there, and he's looking again. He might try and make it 3, but I just don't think it's going to work.
And Bobrovsky not able to make it quite stick on the outside. Here comes the sun on the inside line, though. Marek Sakowicz nearly making contact with the door that time through the little kink in towards the Rodriguez International Horseshoe.
It's always difficult to get it going on the outside, though. He might be able to do this. It looks like he's going to have the inside for the kink, but then the second horseshoe will be back on the outside. It's just so difficult to make a pass actually in the infield. It sounds strange because obviously we see the LMPs doing it all the time, but it's really, really difficult as a GT3.
Well, Eric Mickey, this is Christmas Day for him. He's looking in his mirror going, oh, yes, guys, just have a good old punch-up. That's fantastic. I'll be able to just disappear. You look at the amount of gap now that Eric Mickey's just pulling away from these two as they bicker. This is really, really costing them.
And finally, a bit of a run for the 8 machine on the bottom side of the racetrack, but Trevor Bobrovsky has a chance to get the draft on back. These two have been here bumper to bumper now for the past couple laps, and now see if Bobrovsky tries to go for the send back. Very big defensive line, but also very big line for the prototypes as they dive their way 3 wide into the corner.
My.
Very, very defensive line there by the BMW. It's going to head on the exit as we see another prototype sweeping to the outside, kind of cutting off the avenue of attack there for Bobrovsky.
Yeah, Bobrovsky really wants this spot, but this is a dangerous time to try and make a move at this moment, Peter, especially with all these faster cars coming up on the outside. Looking like it's going to calm down for a little bit, but it has been chaotic at the moment for this grouping.
It has, yeah. I mean, you can look at it 2 ways. You can see it as a real danger point where there's a high risk of having an incident, or you can see it as an opportunity. And some drivers see it one way, some drivers see it the other. And clearly, the Lamborghini there of Bobrovsky, he's trying to use it as an opportunity and try and catch the place back. But all the while this battle's been going on in GT3 for P2 and P3, it's allowed Ryan Walker in that dark blue Lamborghini in 4th position to try and just gather some pace back up again. And he's definitely on the move. He's on the charge. He's on his way.
Absolutely. This has been interesting to say the very least, and continues to help Ryan, who's been running in place essentially in that spot, as you mentioned, for a few laps or so. Ryan Walker's pace, by the way, Christian, 1:45.2s. The quickest laps for the drivers up in front, 1:45.1s. The fight, though, has seen them run 1:46s at the moment. That's how hard they're fighting.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Obviously, with guys battling, it pulls everybody back together, and then the draft equalizes everybody again. So you got to be careful. And Eric Mickey has obviously had that incident, but been able to get back to the lead. And these guys fighting for second behind him has just allowed him to re-establish himself with a pretty similar lead. See Bobrovsky running a little bit wide there on the exit of the bus stop, and I really feel this battle for second is just going to run the entire time throughout the race, because these two have been inseparable pretty much since the very beginning of the race.
Same thing goes for potentially the battle for third in the prototypes between Wolf and Rechkovic. It's going to be important for notes for respective team data for some of these groupings, especially to help improvement throughout the campaign. And keep in mind, Christian, we're talking about this fuel coming up towards pit stop time. Last year, 40 minutes was the time frame for these cars to pit.
Yeah, we're expecting the LMP2s to come down around about lap 22, so we're coming up on that point. And then the GTEs and GT3s will be coming down significantly later, really. At the moment, they're on about lap 18 and 19, so they've got about a third of the run to go.
And Rechkovic actually getting let on go rounder by Joshua Wolf there. Now, as these drivers work their way just past 2 hours to go, take a quick break. We'll be back in 5 minutes here on the Global Sim Racing channel for coverage of the major series, European region, Daytona 2.4. Once again, stay tuned. Back in 5 minutes here on the Global Sim Racing channel. back to the Global SimRacing Channel's coverage of the Major Series European Region, Daytona 2.4. We apologize sincerely for technical difficulties. As to update you on what's going on, we are approaching 90 minutes to go on the clock at the moment. Taking a look at the battle for fourth position, Andrei Rechkovic and Riley Thompson have been going back and forth for this position for the past few laps. There have been, however, several drivers who have been involved in some incidents. Trevor Bobrovsky hit the back end of his teammate David Baker after a spin in turn 6 just 5 minutes ago. That damaged David H. Baker's car to the point where he had to take an early pit stop. As well, several drivers ended up having some incidents, including David Barriclow, who was in this fourth position before the back and forth started to intensify before trouble ensued. Now, these drivers are in the midst for a majority of the field approaching their first pit stops. The prototypes have already completed their set service, where just about everyone in the entire field did not take tires, Peter. Now, the GTEs and GT3s, they're approaching their window in the next 5 to 10 minutes plus on the clock. So the fuel windows are approaching for a majority of the classes, but a majority of the prototypes are currently on cycle in the midst of their second stints of the race so far.
Yeah, this is the part of the race where it all becomes to be a little bit more jumbled up, and it kind of becomes one constant flow of traffic, and a little bit harder for the drivers, unless they've got a very good spotter, to kind of have a feel of where all the different classes are. So here you just got to try and keep your nose clean and keep going, but still, this GTE battle still batters on between Ross Banfield and Tim Claessens, but no sign of Harrod in the Porsche so far. He's about 2.5 seconds further down the road. So they've, while we've just been off the air there, Banfield and Claessens have just pulled that little bit from Harrod in the Porsche. But these guys have been racing super hard and super aggressive, and keeping it up that way, there's always a risk of a little bit of contact. And Tim Claessens, he's been there the whole race. He's been in second place, right on the gearbox of Banfield, but he's not been able to make the move by yet.
He's been just saving fuel, to say the very least, throughout this run. And Christian, you talked about him a little bit earlier tonight, where he does have some experience racing against you. He actually took a year off throughout 2020 and is looking to be back with a vengeance, as his team said, for personal victories, but mostly for the team win overall for his grouping. This is again the Caregiver TFR Daytona car to Claessens we're talking about here.
Yeah, I remember having a very tight battle with him at Bathurst in the V8s actually, and that was a whole lot of fun. I think actually something happened to him in that race which ended that battle a bit prematurely, which was a shame. But up until that happened, that was really fun. And obviously here he's proven again that he can contend. I've got to think that he's going to pit about at least one lap later than Ross Banfield does, because otherwise this whole idea of sitting behind Banfield is really pointless. Because if he has more pace and he's going to run the same number of laps, he should try and get by and go out front. But if he's actually saving fuel, which I strongly suspect he is, then I think we'll see him run at least one lap longer.
Now, he's been running behind him and lifting off down the front straightaway for that fuel save throughout this entire run. Live timing and scoring is available, by the way, at GSRC.tv for today's action. Keep up with your favorite teams and drivers throughout the racetrack today. As you can see, though, some more prototypes ready to say hello. Dawson Brock, Henry Bennett are among those cars ready to lap them as well. Peter Rod is also still in the midst of those cars. He's lost a bit of the back touch to these top two, in fact, at the moment. Peter, taking a look at that prototype, in particular, Dawson Brock. Everyone's favorite Dawson from Dawson's Brock. You get where I was going with that either way. As he goes to the outside.
I do, JP. Yes, absolutely. And well, yeah, he blasts by. He'll certainly be the GT car's favourite there, because in that number 82 Grizzly TFR Daytona car, just caught on the banking where the P2 car has such a big pace advantage and able to get by completely safely. That's just a dream scenario there. So, yep, it's as you can see, these P2 cars are just touching towards 200 miles an hour. In fact, they tip into the bus stop at over 190, which is a scary thought. But coming into the braking zone in turn 1, you can really lean on those carbon brakes, and it is amazing the stopping power that this car has. It's an amazingly thoroughbred machine. Magnesium wheels on it as well, so lightweight wheels, carbon brakes, and the performance it's capable of is amazing. At the moment, it's the Tasca who's mastering it best.
Absolutely. Keep in mind, their fellow teammates have had some ups and downs in this respective class. We mentioned Dawood, who is one of their big team pickups for the Grizzly TFR Le Mans drivers, who have had some ups and downs. We take a look at some of the others meanwhile. We mentioned Barraclough and his success in this event in the past. He's looking to hold on to 6th spot. His teammate Joshua Wolf getting a bit of a pull from behind. We'll see if he goes for the move, and does. And this is with traffic 3 wide into the corner. Still able to complete it in time as they reach the back end of Tom Crowley and a lap down.
Wow, that was bold. That was very bold indeed. Just popped out of the draft of his teammate, and there was a BMW M4 GT3 car in the way, but they all got through cleanly. Good heads-up driving from all concerned there. And yeah, you've got to have some trust in your fellow competitors to pull that sort of stuff off.
And I have to say, Christian, this partnership has worked out very well. Of course, Torque Freak Racing and Grizzly Motorsports, prior to last year, known for their successes separately in this series and being stalwarts before they decided to work together for this campaign with their respective drivers, and it's worked out well for them. But at the time, they were one of the top contenders for the team championship. Pit stops underway, though, for the GT3s, involving some of those cars, including Eric Mickey.
Yeah, both Eric Mickey and Sakowicz came down that time, and in the BMWs I'm actually keeping an eye. Sam Harper was able to extend out 1 lap longer, as was Cordell Colon, so it looks like there has been a little bit of fuel saving going on for these guys. I don't suspect we're going to see anybody taking tires, and that pit stop time suggests that they did not, so I think we'll see everybody try and get to the end on a single set here.
I saw Eric Mickey, sorry guys, Eric Mickey was up on the jacks there.
Yeah,
taking tires,
That's going to be interesting, Christian, because Mickey went 1 minute and 9 seconds. Sakowicz 30 seconds in his pit stop.
He's never going to make that time back. That's a very strange decision. I was actually keeping an eye on Sakowicz and kind of assuming that Mickey wasn't going to take tires. But yeah, I can't explain that. I really can't, because he's never going to make that time back. There's just no question about it. I said that we might see some of the GT3 drivers struggle towards the very end of the race, but that's the very end of the race, and especially in a situation such as this where the track temperature is only dropping as we move further into the night, the tires will only last longer and longer as the race goes on. So I don't see how Mickey's strategy is going to work here. I think he's actually just lost the race.
That's really interesting, absolutely. And Peter, I'm almost wondering the thought process may be, if it ends up going the way I think it's about to go here for this, if they're electing maybe not take the tires on the next pit stop and taking the tires now and to this double stint to the end after they have to top off of the gas?
Well, it's going to be a fascinating storyline. We know that Mickey has got the pace advantage. That's been quite clear in the opening phase of the race. The only, playing devil's advocate slightly, I mean, the only thing it might be is that when it does get to the end of the race, of course, that's when things get really tense and really tight, and when the points, of course, are handed out, and maybe Mickey wants to have the a little bit keener tires, a little bit tires with a bit more life in them for that last kind of phase of the race dogfight. That's really the theory I could sort of volunteer, but we're only going to know as we progress to the next stop if his rivals decide to take those tires late.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the key thing. We've been told there is the potential of the triple stint on some of the tires. Keep in mind, some of the GTEs have also come into pit. Peter Ronzare finished off his service. Ross Banfield's come in. Tim Clayton's, as expected, did go an additional lap. Ryan Mayer, Rob Gall also came in this previous lap as we look at some of the prototypes at the moment. Wolf has been able to pull away from David Barraclough, where Barraclough, remember, who won his respective class last year. Wolf, of course, the team manager for Grizzly TFR. Coming off a Daytona 500 win last year, Peter. 4th place in the points, 5th season in the majors, looking for the goal of a top 3 this year.
Yeah, and of course the Daytona 500, the biggest race you see here at the Daytona International Speedway, so intertwined with the history of NASCAR, and to win that race and all to run quickly in this type of racing is mighty, mighty impressive.
Tim Claeson's now in for his respective pit stop, as we'll see what he elects to do. It was 32 to 34 seconds for a majority of the field so far. So, looking like the double stint is in for a majority of the drivers so far.
Yeah, it looks like it. No tires for Tim Claeson's, just filling up with fuel right now. And it just feels like forever. You're sitting there waiting. It's a big tank in that Corvette. Of course, the first proper mid-engined Corvette race car for Corvette Racing. Built in hand with the street car, the Corvette Stingray, with that hydroformed chassis. Very special bit of kit, and dominated its first season in IMSA last year.
Trouble for David Barricole. He is off the racetrack. The 18 machine from 7th spun around trying to pass by some traffic. He is just going right by that pit exit. He had been trying to pass Eric Mickey, of all people, before he looped it around in the middle of the racetrack. Several cars had to dodge him. Let's take a look at the replay. This was chaotic, Christian, for every class.
Yeah, I was actually just catching that as we were kind of going by it. And you see right here, he was in that horrible situation where he was stuck in the middle of the racetrack pointing the wrong way. And that's the worst possible thing that can happen to you, especially when you can't see around the corner. And you see he dived to the inside of Mickey, got it done, but then went around whilst he was just about clearing him on corner exit.
Yep, Richie Hearn just barely avoided that as well.
Richie Hearn in the 70 car here. Of course, Richie got on the podium at the Indianapolis 500 in his debut back in 1996, which still to this day is the fastest ever Indy 500 for qualifying. But we've just missed it there, unfortunately, folks. But good heads-up driving there from Richie, a man who knows a thing or two about diving through traffic at high speed.
Yeah, that was a little bit dicey, to say the very least. His teammate Tom Drelling, for reference sakes, by the way, has not had the best of days. In fact, his teammate just came in for a third time this race. This is something to mention, by the way, where drivers will have a penalty such as this if they receive 20 incident points, Christian, on the race. Every 20 incident points overall, they have to serve a drive-through, essentially. Tom Drelling apparently may have hit that. Incident count limit 35 for today.
Yeah, and it's quite easy to do that, especially with the bus stop, where you can pretty much pick up a 1x incident every single time through there if you be very aggressive with the curbs. So it doesn't surprise me that even only 40 laps into the race, we're seeing drivers actually picking up those penalties.
We have had a swap in the lead for the GTEs of note. It's Tim Claeson who is now in the race lead by a couple seconds over Ross Banfield with that additional lap. And he's right now turning quick times around this circuit.
Yeah, we saw Tim Claeson's, of course, was the guy who sat in the shadow of Ross Banfield for the entirety of the opening stint, about an hour or so, all the way in the draft, and that will have definitely improved his fuel consumption for Tim Claeson's over Banfield, and that gave him an edge, which allowed him to hop Banfield in the pit stops. And now that he's got a bit of clean air, we saw it, didn't we, guys? He was pretty impatient to almost look like he wanted to move past, and then decided to back out of it during the first stint. But now that Tim Claeson's has got the fresh air, he's hitting the afterburners in that C8 vet.
We've seen how tight the pit stop windows are, just the raw pace coming into play. Of course, a long-time sim racing veteran. We've seen him perform in many different levels in the past. Someone you can always depend on for these types of races, especially in endurance-style events. 50 estimated laps to go for this respective class, by the way, on the racetrack at the moment. There is a close battle starting to form up with the prototypes of note. At the other end of the horseshoes, coming out of the horseshoes of reference, Marcus Romner, Riley Thompson, Andrei Rechkovic are curling near bumper to bumper. So things are getting intriguing around this racetrack, all while Claeson's having a lot of space to work on. Let's take a look towards some of these prototypes. Wolf is trying to close up to them. Romner is currently in the midst of traffic with Thompson currently a few car lengths up the road. Christian, it's been dicey so far for Thompson. A good recovery for him after that incident early on with Dallas Pataska.
Yeah, I think he's actually done a great job to kind of get his head back down, and obviously pointing at the tire wall so early on in the race after contending for the win essentially is pretty disappointing and not what you want. But to be able to recover as well as he has, and to look at realistically a chance at getting third place here, as he just simply takes the position away, just not contested at all right there.
It'll look very easy, in fact. Thompson's still dealing with a bit of that damage on the back end of the race car, Christian. Do you feel that's going to impact him at all for the rest of this race, especially since it's right essentially where, I believe it's where, a little bit where the diffuser exhaust would be, right square with the back wing?
Yeah, it's probably going to lose him a little bit of straight line speed, but I guess not really that much. It might look visually worse than it actually is in a physics sense, because he had no problems there executing that pass. And his lap times look good, so I don't think it's hurting him all that much actually.
The thing is he's 34 seconds behind the race leaders. Is the crazy thing. He's just not been able to get through the traffic as well compared to the others so far to get back up to Pataska and company. So we look at Rajkovic, who's now in the next car trying to attack the 81 machine.
Yeah, and just an update on GTE, guys. Banfield losing the tail of Tim Klessens, and just shows you that in the clean air, Klessens has got that advantage. So he must have been fuel saving hard in the opening stint, just sitting in the shadow of Banfield. Here's your GTE leader going past one of the GT3 front runners, one of the pit stop BMW GT3s of Eric Mickey, who is playing. He's rolling the dice, isn't he, Christian, with those new tires? We're going to find out in the next stop if anyone's going to try the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think his only chance right now is to just push as hard as he can to try and make up that gap that he's inherently had by taking tires, because really he needs to be averaging about 0.5 to 0.6 of a second faster than everybody else in the class to make up for that disadvantage that he's given himself. And I've actually been just trying to work out what the strategy play is right now in the GT3 class, and a couple of drivers really extended out that first run. Sam Harper and Ryan Walker are able to go actually out to 33 laps on that first run, so a lap longer than I even thought was possible, which is quite an interesting deal, because it means that their last pit stop for the splash and dash will be very, very short compared to the other drivers who pit on lap 31 and 32. And Sakowicz looks like he's tried to take his splash and dash early, because his pit stop time is time stationary in the box is 11 seconds quicker than anybody else in the class.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, I was about to say, it almost looked exactly like that, which was the process we were discussing a little bit, Christian. And how do you feel that could play out potentially if you do it early, like that splash and dash, and then take the long stop late?
Well, I'm thinking that it might actually be a play to try and give himself a little bit more tire life, because a lot of the other drivers seem to have come in not taking tires but taking a full tank of gas. And I suppose if you're very confident in the fuel numbers that you need to split that last pair of runs essentially into two even runs, that could give you a little bit of an advantage in tire life, because you won't be carrying as much weight for that the second run, but the first on the old tires, so to speak. And that might be his play here, that he's just thinking, hey, if I carry a little bit less weight in the second run, it might actually translate into better performance in the third run, even though he's going to give that time back, because he can't outrun physics. He has to use the same amount of fuel as everybody else.
We're following along with the prototypes at the moment, and we're talking about this a little bit before, Christian, where do you potentially see tires being taken at all for the prototypes as well, with the strategies coming to play on the GT3 side? Do tires come into play for the prototypes tonight?
I don't think a set of 4 tires comes into play for the prototypes, but I think there's the potential for a set of rear tires to come into play. That's about an extra 12 seconds in the pit stop, so that I think you can make up on track, but it'll just be a question as to if we see anybody actually take up that option.
Keep in mind that was a viable option for those tuning in for the Pro Invitational race for the IMSA drivers here in the daytime over the past weekend. That was on Sunday afternoon. In that respective race were several drivers who have worked with some of the competitors here in the past even. We're trying to race around this circuit. Thompson around some of the traffic, able to get by some of that of note as well. Dawson Brock is in an issue in the bus stop. He has now had to pull into the pit lane, so Dawson Brock, now with significant damage to the 82 car, is now off the circuit at the moment. has changed right behind. You see the battle side by side a little bit. That respective grouping, Rogner, that time letting Rajkovic right on by.
GTE class, the gap looking pretty steady now between Claessens and Banfield, both settling into their respective paces now in the middle of this second stint as well. And Pete Harrod's not too far back in the Porsche 911 RSR, so he'll be right there if any of these two Corvettes hit troubles. But interesting point about the prototypes with the rear tyres. I mean, obviously this LMP2 prototype's got a lot of horsepower, and obviously all through the rear wheels. I would think that the guys that are going to try and stretch all 4 tyres all the way to the end, those rear tyres are going to be dead by the end. And I think, as Christian said, it's definitely going to be worth it going for those rears. But interesting battle here appearing in the GT3 category. And we were talking about the fuel saving as well. Ryan Walker, you do know that Ryan's Scottish, like me. With us saving fuel and saving resource and therefore money is a bit of a speciality here in Scotland, don't forget.
Yes, indeed, and it looks like a car off the track. That's Henry Bennett. Henry Bennett from Kinetic Racing's had an issue. That was after he lost grip in the back end of the tires, believe, in turn 1. He's back and rolling, though. So a mistake from Henry Bennett, known for his skills in the open wheel cars.
See passing the outside of the GTE car and probably just ended up a little bit late on the brakes and tried to get it pulled up but just not able to, and looped it around. Very, very easy to do in any car really here, but especially so in the prototype if you snatch your front brake.
So he ends up going around and loses a little bit more time. Of note, Dawson Brock with significant damage repairs at the moment, not able to get back on the racetrack after that aforementioned issue that happened in the bus stop a couple laps ago. But to get back towards that saving discussion, I have to say, so far, it's been a good run for Sam Harper in this respective race, Christian, where he's been able to save on behind with Cordell Cologne right now, and we've seen him last year when he raced against the pro drivers as one of the sportsman's drivers be really competitive. And as mentioned at the top of the broadcast, 8 sportsman victories.
Yeah, obviously a driver who was getting it done in sportsman last year, and looks like he stepped up to pro really quite well right now. He was one of the few who was able to extend out that stint that first time round, so I think he's trying to do the same again. A little bit unsure as to how he's ended up behind Cordell here, but I think it's all part of his plan, because he's just been really kind of closing the gap to the leader throughout the race in strategy sense. So it's interesting to see a driver play it out like this, but definitely not been involved in any incidents like we've seen with Eric Mickey, and still in contention here.
See some of the traffic going right on by as Rowley Thompson now has been reeled right back in by Rajkovic. Rajkovic still not able to get the run quite yet to make a move yet in this machine, and just electing to stay single file once more in this grouping here. Approaching 1 hour to go on the clock, and these drivers are approaching stops. How about a dive to the inside though? Thompson gives him the space, change for third.
Yeah, classic move there at the International Horseshoe. Just dive it up the inside, tuck it in, and then they go through the kink flat out. And yeah, the number 99 car there of Rajkovic in the Huisking-Welt backed machine. Lots of tongue twisters, not only his team name, but his second name as well.
And for Rajkovic, keep in mind, someone based out of Austria, competitive sim racer for many years, has won in various different series across the iRacing platform with this respective organization, also has raced in real life in open wheel cars, actually has a full-on motion rig set up for his respective car, and these cars expected to come in. Dallas Bataska in for service. So pit stop window is open, Christian, for the prototypes. Expecting potentially 23 laps total of the distance, maybe one more, maybe 2 more overall, possibly.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be about 1 more with maybe a little bit of a stretch in there, so we'll just have to keep an eye on that. But definitely not easy for these prototype guys to kind of figure out a strategy for this race. Obviously, they're pitting a lot more often than, say, our GTEs and GT3s, where the pit stop strategy is relatively fixed. Speaking of GT3 pit stops again, we see Dallas taking tires, which makes sense, I think. I think if you're going to take tires, you take them about halfway through the race. You definitely don't hang around and wait until the very end when you've kind of already burnt your original set off and you're really just kind of making a recovery drive at that point.
You can already see those back tires really swirling on around as he's off the jacks. Off and away goes Dallas Pataska, 55 seconds on the jacks that time. So, we haven't talked too much about the car in second spot, the 98 machine. Mike Newson has been very quietly running in that spot all race long, Peter. Just has been running it within about 6 seconds of Pataska's pace.
He has, yeah. Now we've got him coming into pit lane now. A little pinch at the brakes, just locking up slightly coming into pit lane. Hopefully got it slowed down in time to get that pit lane speed limiter on. In he comes. Well, he'll be taking a full slosh of fuel, but what we really want to know is he going to take tires? Is he going to mirror Pataska's strategy? I would suggest that he will do, but we'll keep an eye on him now as he comes into his pit stall. It's an amazing place, but the pit lane at Daytona, and when you see these, the great privilege of watching the Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac DPI coming in for a couple of its first pit stops of the Rolex 24 from the pit wall, and when they do the burnout to get a bit of generate, a bit of heat in the tires, my goodness me, it makes the ground shake. It's fantastic.
Off and away, no tires, yes. So he's electing to go a bit of different strategy here, Christian. This may be an interesting move.
Yeah, this is definitely going to push Pataska into making an effort to catch back up, because obviously there's a real chance that he's not going to take tires for the rest of the event now.
Yeah, it puts him in a bit of a box as Pataska drives by Thompson, Richie Hearn, George Gruber, who are all in the pit boxes. Dalwin actually coming in as well to those respective cars. So Rejkovic, Romner, Wolf yet to pit in front of them. Valverde has also recovered inside the top 5 after having to take a fast repair early on in this race. So Valverde continuing his recovery drive after a lap 1 incident, and he nearly snaps it around to the West Horseshoe. Perfect timing.
So we're really getting into the business end now, and of course we're approaching the point in about 10 minutes or so, that kind of critical point where both of the GTE and the GT3 classes can make their pit stop and get to the end if they fill a full fuel fill. There's a mouthful for you. But we see Ross Banfield, he's just just edging out ever so slightly. Tim Claessen's just putting in a couple of hundreds here, a couple of hundreds there, but it's sitting at about 5 seconds. However, we of course saw Tim Claessen's getting the jump in the first pit stops by virtue of his fuel saving in the first stint. He has definitely not been fuel saving this time around. He's been pushing really hard. So you never know, guys. It could come back to Ross Banfield a bit.
You think so, Christian?
Yeah, I actually think it could, because the thing is, it only takes one prototype or one GT3 to slow Claessen's up, and then Banfield's back within draft range. But I think this is smart by Claessen's, because this whole pit stop cycle was really an opportunity to get a break between the two cars and to really get some kind of advantage going. And it's situations like that are really how you win races, where if you're tied to someone in terms of draft luck like they were that first run, you know that realistically there is no opportunity to just drive away from them. You're too close on pace. You can't do that.
Several drivers still in the pit lane. You can see Joshua Wolf really trying to prepare himself for a launch on the jacks. Valverde, you see in the backdrop, again, that slightly different cycle and strategy with some of his trouble. Just went up on his jacks. Barriclough is also up on his jacks. Richie Hearn had originally not taken tires, but he has come down a second time now in the past 2 laps. So Richie Hearn with a bit of problems for the Elite West Chrome car. That takes him off cycle for now. Butekos did not take tires as well. Pataska took tires as seen. Thompson took tires on their respective services. Rejkovic and Romner now in for the respective stops as well, you see. So various strategies coming in now as the top 2 on track are now in for the respective service here, Peter. We'll see if they elect to go and take the tires here for their respective stops.
Yep, let's keep an eye on them then. We see Richie Hearn gets back going again. No tyres for him. So something strange going on there with Richie having to come back into the pit stop. Maybe a penalty possibly, maybe a stop and go or something of that ilk. But Dallas Pataska, here he goes. He's got quite a bit of GT3 traffic to worry about here, but he looks on the charge. And he's now up into second position. One stop to go for all the classes now, but the P2s will expect them in around 35 to 40 minutes to go. The GT cars, they could be in any time from 5 minutes from now.
Pataska has cycled 14 seconds behind Dinesen on the racetrack. As a result, Rajkovic took tires. Romner did not. So various strategies have broken up some of the position battles for Pataska. He's going to need to close up a ton of time through this stint while taking it near 3 wide with some of the Bombshell Racing Team cars. Off and away he goes. Ran a 1:33.6 last time by. Dinesen ran a 1:35.319 last time by. A difference of about 2 seconds, Christian.
Yeah, I gotta think that Dinesen was caught up with a lap car right there, because there's realistically no way he's lapping that much slower. We saw he was pretty close to Pataska's pace in the beginning half of the race. So I think he was just caught up with somebody as he puts in a 34.8. But it is going to be interesting to see what the difference in pace between these two drivers is, because 14 seconds is definitely a viable distance to catch with an hour to go. But at the same time, it's also not trivial either. I'd say this was pretty much a sure thing for Dallas if he was within 4 to 5 seconds. But 14 seconds, that's a little bit more. That's a little bit of a challenge, definitely.
Not going to be as easy, absolutely. Especially keep in mind, track temp is still on the fairly cool side, Christian. 74 degrees Fahrenheit at the moment, 72 is the air temp. So it's still a bit more on the cooler end, as a lot more traffic you see. Dallas Pataska able to get on through, lost him a bit of time, but it's back within 13 seconds or so in the infield.
Yeah, track temperature coming down is definitely going to help the drivers trying to make this on a single set of tires. The other thing is, the track has obviously rubbered in quite significantly since the start of the race, and we tend to see, especially in oval racing, that the first run is always the hardest on the tires, and then it gets easier from that point onwards. So I think we're going to see the same thing here, but that's also something to keep an eye on and keep in mind as a driver and as a team, because you can't, in a race like this, the LMPs, it's a little bit different because they've got more than 2 pit stops, but in terms of, say, the GT classes, they'll have all been trying to get a read on what they're going to do in terms of tire strategy off their first stop in the box, and it's not really enough information to make the call. So it's a little bit of a judgment call to make, and also a little bit of guesswork in terms of whether you think you can do the race on a single set of tires, knowing that the first run is going to be the hardest on them.
That's why the preparation comes in, right, Peter? Because a lot of these teams are also preparing for the Daytona 24, the war before. You get all these laps in, and it's important for this series too, to get as much information and data as possible.
Absolutely, that's when being in a good team is so critical nowadays in the sim racing world. To be able to be successful as an independent is incredibly tough, because you're doing it, like you say, all that data gathering. You're doing it on your own. Whereas if you're in a good team, you're of course working together, tuning that setup in, and of course, as always, surrounding yourself with the best people, whether that be drivers, engineers, or whatever. It really helps, and well, when you're surrounded by top level drivers, you raise your game for sure, and especially with the amount of testing and practice that these guys.
And Marcus Romner's punted off a car. David H. Baker hit in the back end by a prototype, as that was right as Marcus Romner, who is 3rd place, was trying to get through some of the traffic. So tempers are flaring. Ray Partridge also had been dove in underneath the previous corner and has not been too happy. Let's take a look what happened here, and you'll see a little bit of a bump right there.
Yeah, that's not really anything that can be said there on the GT3's part. The GT3 was clearly holding the inside line. Roma just decided he was going there anyway.
Yeah, tempers flaring a little bit there, as Rumner is still 38 seconds back here. Top runners, Pataska is now within 12 seconds. Riley Thompson is currently 12 seconds back of these respective cars on the racetrack. Speaking of cars, just in front of them, Cologne and Harper still bumper to bumper. Harper continuing to save still.
Yeah, Harper's on an absolute economy drive here. I keep watching this battle thinking that he's going to try and take the second place back, but to be honest, he never looks interested in it. He's lifting off pretty much at the flag stand to try and save some fuel. And I think it's a good strategy because that first run, he was able to go out to 33 laps. So the second one, he should be able to get out to 66, which really means that his end run is probably going to be in the 20 to 24 lap region.
See some of the traffic trying to cut to his outside. Marcus Rohner, in fact, as well. So it's going to be interesting how this all plays out for Sam Harper, looking for a podium in the first race of the season. Potentially is a near bit of contact. Owen Mites. Bit near scrapey with Cordova Cologne's left doors.
Just looking back at Ryan Walker and Eric Mickey just at the back, just not too far behind on the circuit. You'll just see them at the back of shot there on the high banks as well. Ryan Walker in 4th, but remember Mickey's got those slightly better tyres, and you can see that this, of course, gets in the draft. He's got those better tyres. He can lean on the brakes that little bit more. This BMW's got wonderful change of direction, really, really nimble, and through he goes. And well, Eric Mickey made that look easy, but that's a good demonstration of maybe it gives one example of why Eric Mickey decided to take those tyres. But is it going to be enough? As you mentioned, Christian, he's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think the effective gap actually between Sakovic and Mickey is in the region of about 17 seconds. Obviously, there's going to be a bit of a difference in this last pit stop because we saw Sakovic take 10 seconds less worth of fuel. So he's going to have to pay that back. And currently, the actual on-track gap between them is about 27 seconds. So it's 17 seconds for Mickey to run down in terms of raw pace. I still don't see how he's going to do that. Just looking at average paces, he's not quick enough to make that happen.
Now, right now, 1:45.4 last time by. That's with some of the traffic for Eric Mickey. Sakovic 1:45.7 for him on the stopwatches. Under an hour to go on the clock. They have an estimated total of 34 to go this time by, approaching the fuel mark to make it to the end in the next little bit or so for these respective cars, and the strategy can open up from there. See how things play out, to say the very least, in this one.
We're now into the window for the GT cars as well. Both GT3 and GTE could come in now and take their fuel fill and make it to the end. So who's going to try and break the sequence? Who's going to throw the dice here? Tim Claessens has had a brilliant second stint here, really laying down some really top pace in that Corvette C8R. At the moment, he has a 5.2 second advantage from Banfield and also in the Corvette C8R, but he's got, I think this is Richie Hearn coming around. Yes, it is, in the number 70 car in the prototype, but Richie is showing some good heads up there, just waiting his turn to go by, and having to be a little bit more forceful when required, but good heads up stuff, and through he goes, the former Toyota Formula Atlantic champ.
Richie Hearn, also a very stellar broadcaster as well. Did a lot of stuff with IMSA for iRacing side of things a few months ago, as Dallas Pataska in range to potentially lap Richie Hearn as well. That's how quick the satellite racing driver has been today. Your race leaders again, Pataska in the class lead for the prototypes, or rather in second for the prototypes by 9 seconds to Thieneson. Then, at the moment, Tim Claessens leading his respective class in the GTEs. Then in the GT3s, it's Sakovic currently in the lead over Cologne and Sam Harper on the racetrack. Christian, what are you keeping an eye on here for these closing stages, especially with the blistering pace being set by our top runners in strategy?
Really, all just keeping an eye on who's going to take tires at this last pit stop, who isn't, and in terms of how aggressive people are going to be with fuel, because there's going to be a couple of drivers out there, I'm sure, who are going to try and short fill this to get a little bit of track position, but then will have to save. And obviously with it being a timed race, you've always got that, is it going to be one extra lap, is it not going to be one extra lap? You got to keep that in mind when you're making that last pit stop.
Indeed. We'll see how this plays out. As why don't we listen on board with the machine you're following along with here. This is your current GT3 leader, one of the newest cars in the iRacing service. Take a listen in. Been following on board with Marek Sakovic, rather, as he continues to lead by a significant margin with the different strategy at the moment. Under 54 minutes to go on the clock for the Daytona 2.4 on the global SimRacing channel for the European region for the Major Series. So far, it's been a competitive one with various different strategies. Keep in mind that today was race in support of the Wounded Warrior Project as well. Be sure to donate to them by going once again to woundedwarriorproject.org. Pit stops underway for Darwin Mites for Bombshell Racing Team. That's one of the GTE cars coming in for their expected final stop at the moment. There was also a scary moment, keep in mind, for the car we were following on board with. You may have noticed, as there was a car that drove backwards on the racetrack. Colin Martzoff in particular. That gave him a bit of a scare. Other than that, things have been calm so far, Peter.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what happened or why he was driving backwards on the racetrack. The only thing is when you do, if you lose it at turn 1 and you get into a big spin, you can sometimes get a little bit disorientated, but usually should know the way around. Quite a strange one there, but we can see interesting Darwin Mites for Bombshell Racing taking tyres. 52 minutes left in the race, so see what kind of pace that car will be capable of. Interesting to take tyres that late in the race.
Absolutely. let's take a look at what happened with that incident we're referring to with Colin Martzoff that gave a bit of a scare to a couple competitors where he lost in the kink and then went backwards.
Oh dear, I think he's trying to do a flick turn. He's trying to line it up to do a flick turn, but kind of driving in the wrong direction. Of course, the headlights as well be dazzling the drivers coming towards him, and maybe should have just waited his time, dipped the clutch and whipped it round. But Colin Martzoff, I wonder if he'll maybe get a little bit of a telling off from the major series organisers for that.
We'll have to see one of the Hanson brothers racing cars with a bit of a rough one last in class at the moment. But first in class is about to get fun, Christian, because guess who is now within 2 seconds? Guess who's been half a second quicker now? Dallas Pataska. He just turned a 1:33.8 with the traffic even, and now Dallas Pataska nearly drove it off the racetrack.
Yeah, Thenison had a pretty bad lap last time around. I think he got caught up with a lot of traffic, but obviously that's just completely obliterated the gap between himself and Pataska, and Pataska's just been ruthless in terms of cutting his way through the traffic. And yeah, I thought it'd be a lot harder than this to run this gap down. I didn't think that we'd see him within 3 seconds this fast.
This was a similar pace, keep in mind, Peter, if you're keeping an eye on the Pro Invitational race last Sunday in the daytime with much hotter track conditions, where the drivers who took those rear tires were upwards of 1 to 2 seconds quicker a lap. We're seeing that right now from Pataska.
We are indeed, yeah. This is a car which you kind of need it to be at its absolute optimum. It's a real thoroughbred racer, and running it on old tyres is really a handful. And Pataska's putting these new Michelin tyres to very good use indeed right now. This Dallara, built by the eponymous manufacturer of race cars, led by Mr. Jim Paolo Dallara, who's now at the age of 83 and was one of the original designers of the beautiful Lamborghini Miura.
A lovely car, absolutely, and I know many people, when this car came out last year, were pumped up to see it on the surface, especially with its speed, its heyday for this respective chassis around the late 2010s. As traffic lets him on go, it's now under 2 seconds fully, 1.6, make it 1.7 seconds on the entry. One car in between them at the moment, that's Ray Partridge. Then there is some clean space to close up. There is some interclass traffic, though, that could come into play with Travis Henderson and several others who are up the road for these respective competitors.
Interesting, the GTE pack, the top three are now held within 5 seconds. Tim Klassen's had a little bit of trouble in traffic the last couple of laps. It's now down to 2.4 seconds between Klassen's in the 451 car and Ross Banfield in the 777. Don't forget, Ross Banfield led all the way in the opening stint, was jumped in the pit stops by Klassen at the first pit stop, but any minute now, one of these drivers will come into pit lane. They're right in the window. They can take it any time they want now, and they'll be running on low fuel, I guess, wanting to maximize the time with the car on low fuel as well. But Ross Banfield absolutely on the charge and has had the rub of the green with the traffic the last little while. But look what's happened to Harrod. He was 5 seconds, now down to 7.7. So it's yo-yoing back and forward depending on how things play out with the traffic.
Absolutely. Look, as the traffic actually passing by, Ross Banfield's going to lose him a little bit more time right on back. That was Ronnie Thompson of the Total Downforce cars driving to his outside that time. And your head almost has to be on a swivel for this type of event, Christian, where if you don't have your head on the swivel, especially in the high banks, it can cause some problems if you aren't keeping an eye on your surroundings. And we've seen some close manners today. Most of the field, though, has been able to keep their eyes open to see what's been going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Traffic management's been kind of wild throughout the day. Obviously, we've seen some incidents already with LMP2s and some of the GT class leaders, in fact. Actually, speaking of the the GT3 class, Eric Nicky has now taken over the class lead, but that's because Sakovic has actually come in for that shorter, not shorter start, but he did that shorter run, so he's had to come in a little bit earlier as we expected.
41 seconds, though. 41 seconds, though, Christian.
Yeah, that's about the amount of fuel that he would have needed to take, and that's very similar to what the other cars in class took that took only fuel the last time by.
Seeing him off and away. his respective service, so we'll see when the rest of the drivers peel off 24 laps into the stints for a majority of those competitors. To get back to the discussion, though, when it comes to that UDOX machine of Ross Banfield trying to close up that gap we were talking about a little bit, it's one of those series that, if you know the major series, is focused on charity, Peter. Today, the Wounded Warrior Project. Ross Banfield's team also representing Cure LGMD2I, which is a charity focused on finding cure for limb, brindle, muscular dystrophy. We're joining the Cure as a longtime associate for SimAbility as well, which is sporting a new look for this year as well. Charity, a big part of this series.
Indeed, yeah, and it's SimAbility particularly do a great job of creating opportunities for people with a form of impairment or disability to be able to race, and that's the thing is about sim racing, that accessibility is at its absolute core. I mean, running a Corvette C8R at Daytona would be a multi-million-pound project, but in sim racing you can hop in and off you go. And yeah, the charitable aspect is really important as well, and community very important amongst the sim racing world as well, and that's something you also see in the majors.
New race leader for the prototypes, because Dallas Pataska has been able to make the move for that spot on Mike Thieneson. And it came by quickly down the front straightaway, down this past time by, right before they got to the traffic in the infield. Let's take a look at that move as he made it look very easy. It'd be before the infield. Right here. Christian made it nice and easy, and he's pulled away already by more than a second.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all knew that was coming. I don't think we expected it this early on, though, and it's just been kind of ridiculous, the rate of closure, actually. I think Thieneson's probably regretting that he didn't take tires that last time by, and I think we'll probably see him take tires on his final stop now.
Yes, indeed. We'll have to see as the cars around right in front of them. It's Brian Barney who went around, one of the V-Apex cars. We haven't talked much about that team today, but Barney is off and away in the 55. That was right in front of these cars just a moment ago. See what happened. It's been a common mistake today in turn one of drivers running too hot today, it seems, Peter, into the corner.
Yep, the easiest mistake to make. It's such a typical error here at Daytona International Speedway. They come through the trial wheel. Look at that, you're right at the very top, off top gear, and then you've got to lean on these carbon brakes, and you've got to just almost turn and brake at the same time. Not easy, and just loses it, and woof, round it goes. That car not very happy indeed. But back with the GTE guys, that gap is closing all the time. Banfield now less than 1.5 seconds to Clayson, so he's getting close to the point where he will be able to pick up some draft, but you're just wondering, when are these guys going to make their trip to pit lane? We know they've got one to go, one pit stop to go, that is, but when are they going to take it? But tell you what, Banfield, he is in the groove right now at the wheel of that Corvette.
He's been really quick towards the closing stages of this race. Keep in mind that the fuel stint's approximately about 5 to 7 laps out. Banfield is going to have to pit 2 laps earlier, though, than his fellow competitor at the moment. Kurt Crum is elected to take his pit stop, by the way. Remember, he had some troubles early on. He was 32 laps into his stint, so that keeps the math in mind. That math would put Banfield in 5 laps and Clayson's in 7.
I wonder if that's partly what we're seeing here, actually, with this gap coming down between Clayson's and Banfield. I wonder if Clayson's is trying to extend out to an extra lap in this stint again, try and make that difference 3 laps instead of 2, because the difference in fill time in the box is going to be relatively significant. So if Clayson's can get out far enough out ahead to be completely out of draft range, then I think that's going to help him out a lot.
It's going to come down to the math potentially even, Peter, because fuel is time in many different cars, especially in the road course series such as this. It could be interesting to see how much fuel they end up putting in.
Absolutely, it comes down to driving style as well. If that's one thing that Scott Dixon, of course, 6-time IndyCar champion, but also multiple winner at the Rolex 24-hour at Daytona, and he's renowned for being able to go around at lap speed but also save fuel at the same time. Quite a difficult skill, as you see a real...
Oh, trouble! Dallas Pataska! Dallas Pataska's off in the bus stop! Your race leader in the 23 hit the grass and spun it around after passing by traffic. He's lost the lead and he's 6 seconds back now. And he was just trying to pass some of these cars you see up the road, and that leads to the mistake potentially here, Christian.
Yeah, so he clears the RSR quite easily, but looks like he drove in too deep to do it. Gets away with that, though, really, because he only looped it around, and yeah, obviously a big loss of time, but no damage to the car.
That's lost him now officially 8 seconds on the pylon with the traffic. So Pataska going to have a long way to go up the road to get back up to Mike. And now that strategy could get interesting now. Keep in mind as well that Thompson, Rumner, and Rajkovic have converged amongst each other again. Wolf and Puteklis have also converged amongst one another on the racetrack. So the prototypes are heating up right before the respective pit stops in a few laps from now.
Yeah, the prototypes are not long, maybe 2 laps or so until they're in for their, until their fuel window opens and they can get to the end of the race on a full tank. But Pataska, yeah, getting all kinds of squirrely there, going on to the banking. But he's had to push so hard for so long to make his strategy work that it was almost inevitable that just a little mistake might creep in. But as Christian rightly said, managed to make it without damage, which was the main thing.
And that time, no mistake in the bus stop, but the thing that's going to be really interesting is, can he do it again? Can he close 8 seconds again?
Well, I think from my perspective, I think the balance has actually flipped to Thieneson, because I think Thieneson takes tires now, or at least rear tires in the start, comes out probably 5 seconds behind, but has that advantage that Pataska just had on him, and I think that makes it definitely a close fight. Arguably closer than the distance that Pataska had to run down.
Keep in mind that the organization Mike is running for is known for its success in the international split, in particular, Peter. Once again, Texans, Fitzgerald Motorsport, known for having 2 teams in the international region this year who raced in yesterday's race. Mike elected to run in the European split, and so far has looked very quick. This is going to be big if he can come away with a big victory for this organization here.
Absolutely, yeah, this would be a really good win, and also maybe a little bit unexpected, but after we'd thinking Pataska was going to clear off into the distance there, but yeah, that little mistake is shaking things up quite a lot. But we've still got 39 critical minutes of motor racing left, and I think that's where it can really shake out. This is where things get a little bit more frantic. Drivers become a little bit more selfish with their line in the multi-class as well. Everyone's now very much in their own personal battles, so got to watch out for that.
For Mike, as mentioned, running on his own marks him as potential independent. Some of these drivers, such as we mentioned, Total Downforce, Riley Thompson, also marked in that mode. We could also put Andre Rajkovic in that grouping as well, by the way, for Team Pointenveld outside of this series. These drivers, though, have been connected to the hip all day, Christian, it seems. From start to finish, they've been close to one another, especially for the past hour.
Yeah, and I said that the draft kind of keeps everybody together, and I think this is no better example of it than that. Obviously, we saw Riley Thompson making a recovery drive and doing a very good job of it, but he's kind of pulling these guys along with him, I think, at this point.
Yeah, Rajkovic has been fairly impressive throughout the run. He's now the quickest car on the track, Peter.
Yep, absolutely. He certainly is. And but what I'm interested in to see is when are our GTE leaders going to blink? Because at the moment that gap is it's just hovering between 1.5, 2 seconds, thereabouts. They can see one another, but who's going to blink first? Who's going to go to take that final spot? As we see Tim Claessens in the Banfield in the purple Corvette. You'll just see Tim Claessens just a tiny bit up through the road. There he goes through the bus stop. A little bit of GT3 traffic there in the bus stop, and that's a part where the slightly more advanced chassis and suspension of the GTE car really comes in. You don't want to get stuck behind a GT3 car there.
Lost him a little bit of time, but able to make his way towards the outside line goes Banfield. Well, Claessens able to hold on to the inside line, and he has traffic too, though. Eric Mickey, next car up to lap for him, passes on by, makes it look easy towards the inside lines, and he kicked out the back end a little bit. In fact, Banfield, though, gained some time as a result of that traffic. The counterpoint, Christian, that they're going to have to pass right on by them.
Yeah, exactly. That's obviously going to kind of factor into this as well. But I'm just keeping an eye on Ross Banfield, actually, to see when he's going to come down. Obviously, we're suspecting that he's going to be coming down earlier than Clayson's, and they're pretty much at that point now. So I expect them to see them come in any lap now, really.
And the next lap even, potentially for Banfield, as he's been pushing this entire run. Keep in mind, the prototype lead is down to under 6 seconds as well throughout this entire section, because the overall leader is just right behind these cars at the moment. Pataska ran 1:33.5 last time by. There is that prototype leader at the moment. Had to pass by interclass traffic Mike Golightly, who had earlier troubles in this race, who is 7 laps down from your overall race leader.
Yeah, not been a good day at all. But it was surprised me, guys, is the attrition rate has been relatively small. I mean, of the prototypes, most of the drivers on the lead lap all the way down to 10th, and then a handful just 1 lap down, and then GTE pretty close as well. So yeah, it's been a really good race all around for attrition. We haven't seen a graveyard in the pit lane of smashed up race cars, which can happen from time to time.
Ross Banfield's in, Eric Mickey coming in with them right now. So pit stops underway for the GT3s and the GTEs. Mickey, remember, had that incident in the first stint of his race where he had to take tires. The question is, how does Banfield play this out here, Christian?
Well, I think Banfield really has no choice. He's got to try and take the no tires here and just hope that he has some left. I think the interesting one for me is Mickey versus the number 8 BMW Sakowicz, because Sakowicz is still out on track and has made his final pit stop. So whatever the gap is at this point when Mickey comes out of the pit lane, that's really the gap that he has to run down to try and win this race.
Off and away goes Banfield, 25 seconds. Mickey off and away, 30 seconds. Eric Mickey, though, is going to be close with the number 8 machine on the racetrack. In fact, side by side with the 8 coming out of the pit lane just about. The gap has now closed up to only a couple seconds on the difference, with a little bit fresher tires now by a stint for the car in chase. There's the look of the stint difference, 41 seconds for Sakowicz, Mickey 30.4.
Yeah, I think that definitely puts the advantage to Mickey, because he's within draft range of Sakowicz at this point, and with the fresher tires. So I thought it'd be difficult for him to run it down, but he's managed to do it, and he's vindicating his decision to take tires right now.
Dallas Pataska also came in during that time, had a 32.7 second stop, so no tires for him. Riley Thompson is now currently cycled to second for the time being, 44 seconds back of the prototype lead, who is still with Rajkovic and still having to pass by some of these respective cars at the moment. There's a look at Thompson in particular, so the window is open for the prototypes as well. Everyone having a pit at the same time could cause chaos here, Peter.
Yeah, it's going to get busy down in pit lane. You want to make sure you get a nice clean run in and out. Of course, the pit exit here at Daytona is incredibly perilous. You see in the cold of night here in the Rolex 24, they call it, well, can sometimes call it the Wall of Champions, because there's been some seriously prestigious names plowed into that pit wall. And when these guys are frantic to fight for position towards the end of this race, they've got to be careful coming out of pit lane. They will. The good advantage to have is they'll likely be on the same tires, so they'll still have plenty of heat in them, but they still have to take it really easy, as we see the 58 Dallara coming in for the final stop of Riley Thompson.
Yeah. Tires for the 98 machine, though, Christian. He's elected to go up on the jacks. Remember, Pataska did not take tires for this closing stint of the race for the prototype. So, Mike Dindison going on a different strategy. Pataska's already passed by him on the racetrack.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether Thienison's taking 4 here or not, but this looks like a very long stop, so I'm suspecting that he is. I'm really surprised if he does take 4, though he is. Well, I'll have to see what the gap is here, but that looks longer than a 2-tire stop gap should be.
How about 15 seconds?
Yeah, that actually pretty much is, but that's kind of in between, to be honest. I expect the gap to be about 12 seconds. So 15 seconds is a little bit odd. I wonder why it was an extra 3 seconds there.
Oh, contact into the pit lane! Niskanen making contact with Riley Thompson as they came out side by side in a one-lane exit.
There you go. That's what we were worried about. It's when it gets busy in pit lane, you've got to have your eyes up. So they're coming out here in the GT3 car. Almost like they were speeding in pit lane, and that is a bizarre incident. You really want to... I don't see the merit at all for the GT3 car to try and go past the P2. That's just silly.
If anything, that gives a penalty to Niskanen potentially with an unsafe pit exit, since you have to essentially stay within the lines of your pit exit. Really confusing there. We'll have to see what happens with Niskanen. Keep in mind, go lightly, Cologne, Gall, David, among some of the others who have all come into pit. Pete Harada's also come into pit, who's at a quiet final stint of this race. GT3 race lead, though, is going to get interesting now. Where currently Sam Harper is in the current lead. The net lead, though, is tight. Side by side, down the front straightaway, is Sakowicz currently fighting with Eric Mickey. Mickey, remember, took those tires at the end of his first stint after contact, seen him lose the lead for his respective class early on in this race. Not even to make the pass yet.
I think it's only a matter of time before Mickey does make this pass. Obviously closed that gap up really, really quickly. Came out of the pit lane within giraffe range of Sakowicz. Just clearly got more traction right now out of the first horseshoe. I wonder if he's going to try and send it up the inside into the second one here.
By the way, we're hearing from that contact, Robbie Thompson got a meatball flag on top of things, Peter, for that incident off the pit lane. So Thompson's in the second time, all while the GT3's fighting hard. Here comes a prototype to make it 3 wide. That was the dive from Mike Thieneson, driving right on through with the fresher tires. That helps a little bit as Mickey slides up the racetrack.
Yeah, that's an incredible amount of trust and bravery there. The two GT3s did a great job to hold line and hold station, allow that Dallara to slip through a pretty unconventional way to do it, but got it done safe, thankfully. And let's see if Eric Mickey, this plot to have earlier, to have a new set of tyres midway through the race is really starting to play out. And tell you what, if you've ran the first 2 hours of the race on the same set of tyres, they are well past their best now. And this is really coming back to Eric Mickey.
Mickey now looking to make the peak once again to the outside as traffic tries to cut its way on through. Bit of a calmer pack as Mickey having to take the outside line. It's been difficult all day to pass on that line.
Bit of Daytona side draft in here. I like it.
Trying a little bit. Dead even on the brakes. The bottom line, though, sticks for Sakowicz. He's back single file again. Here comes an air prototype. That's Mike Golightly. That now has to get through.
This could be an opportunity here for Mickey, though, if he can follow the prototype through. If the prototype goes up the inside, which he does, forces Sakowicz wide. Mickey's going to slot in behind the prototype. He's going to be on the outside coming into the kink.
Kink sometimes can work with the side-by-side if you play carefully. Mickey elects to brake and go single file instead. West Horseshoe this time with 30 minutes to go, approaching 29 on the clock as Mickey forced to check out.
And yeah, Sakowicz just being very clever there. He knows that he's going to have to play defensive. Does not have any speed left in that car, with the tyres are just absolutely shot, but doing a great job of parking that BMW M4 exactly where it needs to be to not allow Eric Mickey to get by with the slightly fresher tyres. We say relatively fresher, those tyres will still be past their best as well. It's just the relative difference as they head down towards the bus stop. Mickey gets a big draft going down towards the bus stop. It's going to be really tricky here. Oh, but Sakowicz late on the brakes, very late on the brakes, throws it into the bus stop and then parks it on the apex. Brilliant racecraft from the Team Mad driver.
Ryan Walker's in for his respective service. Robbie Thompson's still in for the meatball. Marcus Romner is in. Tom Drowling has also come in. So Sam Harper, the only person in this class yet to pit for the current lead. The net lead, though, is still side by side. Ryan Walker, though, with the strategy, could get into it. Only 25 seconds in the pit boxes. He might have something to say if things intensify here. Eric Mickey on the outside sends it hard into the brakes, misses the corner, as there goes Sakowicz back to the lead, all while Walker able to exit the track still a few seconds back.
There he is, though. Ryan Walker just coming out of the pit exit there as the leaders go into the International Horseshoe, but this is far from done. Here they go then into turn 1. Sakovic just playing it safe, holding that inside line, knowing he can't be bettered. And Mickey really pushing hard, and he's just got to be careful. He's got that lap speed, he's got that speed in the tyre, but with 27 minutes to go, he does have the time to do it. But tell you what, this is a brilliant defensive drive from Sakovic.
7 seconds the gap between Glassons and Banfield for comparison's sake. Dallas Pataska leading by 14 seconds for the prototype lead at the moment. This is the closest battle for the lead on track for the net lead. Sam Harper's already extended to 33 laps. He's gone in for his respective service. Keep an eye on the 52 to see how things play out with these cars now.
Sam Harper might come out in the lead here.
And especially since they're fighting so hard, Christian.
Yeah, I think what's gone unnoticed here is, obviously we talked about...
Oh, contact! And they now bumping and baiting Christian. This is continuing to play in Sam Harper's way to the point where he just took a 22-second stop. But the problem is he's got a late pit box. Early on the pit lane, rather, where he's going to have to take a lot of time in the lane.
Yeah, but he's going to come out miles ahead here. The front two aren't even at the flag stand yet.
So Sam Harper, as these cars have fought so hard, might be in the driver's seat for this class after running third much of the day. Traffic ahead for some of these cars still as Harper pulls off and away by a decent margin. Sakovic, contact! Mickey to the door! He slams to the inside wall, and Sakovic demolished on his car.
Yeah, we kind of thought that there was probably inevitable contact going to happen there, and that choke point caught him out again. And I really think this is just hard racing, and everybody got really, really tight with each other. You see there, I think Sakovic thought that the corner was his. He was nose ahead, but Mickey, kind of rightly so, thought that he had right to be on that outside, and it's just so tight through there. You can't really get two cars comfortably through there no matter what, and this is just an unfortunate result of that.
It was a big risk there from Mickey. I don't know if the room was there in my view, but that's a real shame, because Sakovic was just really defending fair and hard there, and he's got huge damage. He went into the wall, absolutely. Well, it's some brute force there, and he's having to limp the car back. The whole front bodywork absolutely destroyed. Now, does he have a fast repair left? Can he get it to pit lane and get the spare car?
Thing is, it's still going to take him out of contention, but Sam Harper is in this class lead as talked about now. With all the intensity focusing on and an 8-second quicker pit stop, the 52 is now in the class lead over Eric Mickey.
Yeah, this is interesting now as well. I mean, now that could be critical to whether Sam Harper can escape and win this race, because Eric Mickey now has a bit of clean air. While he was parked behind Sakovic, that was perfect for Harper, but you've got to think that Mickey's just got a tiny bit more pace, and but not much time to catch that gap up. 8 seconds, and Sam Harper, the Scotsman with the David Coulthard-esque helmet and the salt tire on the roof. I'm going to be quiet now, guys, because I'm starting to sound like I'm not impartial.
Well, this is a Formula One podcast group, a little bit. It's as...
No one's perfect.
You see some of the congratulations on the side of the car as well. By the way, Lane has competed in the series before, if you can read the text. Let's put it that way. But for Sam Harper, either way, it's going to be intriguing if he can hold on to this right now. Eric Mickey right now at the moment is currently exiting onto NASCAR 1. Sakovic is coming for the fast repair.
It's got to be disappointing for Sakovic. Obviously, he ran a great race, and he was well within his rights to be defending the way that he was, and realistically, it was the only way he was going to keep Mickey behind him, and I think it was totally fair. He was running the inside, both into the bus stop and into turn 1, and Mickey knew that realistically there was no way he was going to get around him on the outside, and I think a lot of times when Mickey went to his outside entering the bus stop, it wasn't really about trying to make that pass, it was more about trying to get Sakovic checked up so that he could then have a run down to turn 1, which he eventually did. And I'm still inclined to say that was a racing deal. I know that really, if you're behind at that point, you should probably be giving up the corner, but he was to his door. I don't think it's anybody's fault, but I do think that Mickey had right to be on that outside like he was.
Yeah. Your overall leader still is Dallas Pataska, by the way, and the thing is, despite the mistakes, and the strategy may come into play here, Peter, to where he might be in a good shot here of holding on with 13 seconds still. The gap only up to 3/10 quicker as Mike Thieneson currently even in some of the cleaner space.
Yeah, cleaner space and, of course, the new tyres. I mean, over the next 22 minutes, we'll just have to keep a close eye on how that one plays out. Pataska's had some real streaks of pace throughout this race. Very, very impressive. Just to update on our GTE field, Tim Clayson's in the pit cycle there again, gathered a few seconds up on Banfield and leads, but he came into the pits with just about 2 seconds of an advantage, now circling around sort of the 7-second mark. Pete Harrod has been thereabouts in the Porsche all day, and bear in mind, Clayson's and Banfield have run pretty much mistake-free the whole race, so and Harrod's been right there, and things always get more frantic in the last 20 minutes in the closing spots of the race, so GTE is far from done.
Yeah, things are going to get intense for the final 21 minutes or so of this race. Keep in mind as well that this is not the only time these drivers are going to come to Daytona too. There's also the fact that, Christian, these drivers are going to be running in the 1987 Daytona 500 next month as well. So it's going to be a busy next couple of weeks for these drivers, where you're not only having to race in the road course portion of the racetrack, but you're also going to have to drive the 97 machines to try and see what they can do. And it's not an easy car to drive on the super speedways, mind you, let alone entirely the 1987 cars.
Yeah, absolutely. And the major series for the past couple of years has ran this 2.4-hour event that has then been followed by a modern Daytona 500, should we say. This year, doing it a little bit differently, running the 1987 cars. I'm a little bit disappointed that we're not running it on the old track, because there's so much fun around there, but at the same time, could be a little bit too much of a step too far. So still should be fun on this modern track, so to speak. And yeah, they move around a lot. Very different racing experience from the current generation of cars, and I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Over and under for caution flags. No offense.
I suspect we'll probably see one every 25 laps.
David Berkle, by the way, went around as we take a look at some of the air cars, including Harper. Keep in mind, he had that dominant stretch we talked about in the sportsman's class, and he showed some speed at times when he was in the pro races. So, for him, this could be a huge, huge mark for him, where he's won 5 or so in a row, if you include 2020.
And that's a pretty excellent record right there. And Eric Mickey is slowly eating into his lead, but obviously we saw how difficult it was for Mickey to pass. And I think the more the clock runs down, the less opportunities. I don't think we should expect to see him even within striking distance until probably 10 minutes to go at the very earliest.
Is there going to be enough gas is the big question. I think some people may be wondering too with 22-second stop, do you think?
Well, he's been extending out to an extra 3 laps every run over the point that I thought was kind of the norm. So if anybody can do it, I think he's going to be able to manage it.
Let's take a look, meanwhile, at Ryan Walker. He's continuing to fight for podium. He's been in this fight all day. He's been running 4th, I think, for the past hour and a half, Peter.
Yeah, it's been a really solid run here from Ryan Walker in the Lamborghini Huracan.
Oh, it had trouble a little bit in front of them.
It's one of the Porsches, I think.
That was Franco Scurry, who's had a very quiet race today. In the 15 machine, 26 overall. Drives outside of the series for Pro Drive Sport, who locked it up as Dallas Pataska went to his inside.
So coming around the kink a really bit where the differences in the cars come to the fore, and it just sort of upsets Franco's rhythm there, and it's got a little bit unsighted there with the prototype. It does a great job not to contact with the tyre wall, keeps the car at least straight in terms of the bodywork, and can carry on with his day. That's the spirit of endurance, as they say. But back to Ryan Walker in the Lamborghini Huracan. Well, he'll be hoping to channel his inner Sandy Mitchell. Of course, Sandy Mitchell, fellow Scotsman of ours, who has just signed for the Lamborghini factory and will now be on the full roster of Works drivers and does the majority of his racing, of course, in this very car.
The defensive line that time in this battle as Cologne sees the send, watches the send as Walker makes the move. Walker 3 seconds less of fuel in the tank, right in time for your second place car, the prototypes, to drive by on the high side here. This will lose Mike Dennison a little bit more time as one car spins around it to the right. David Barraclough is having an adventure this final stage of the race. He was having a bit of trouble prior to this. He's had a couple spins today. This one could have been sketchy.
Yeah,
that could
not
have
a
been
good
very
place to
sketchy.
lose that. Obviously, we've seen a couple of prototypes lose it on the entry actually there, so and he's obviously fighting for rear grip right here, and this is something that we've seen with a lot of the LMP2 drivers, that it's pretty much universally always the rear tires that go off first, and that's why the strategy of taking only 2 rears is quite viable.
Yep. Meanwhile, Walker, after that, has now pulled away. They have Scurry who's trying to get by them once again. That's going to impact this a little bit, but for Ryan Walker, now looking to take off as Scurry goes off into the tires.
Well, the Ryan Walker's, he would have been twitching like a rabbit's nose there, because that was close. Very typical plus stop maneuver, and God, that wall is not far away. Of course, Elio Castroneves and Harry Tinknell both ended up in that wall early on in the Rolex 24-hour last year, and it's prompted the now infamous quote from Helio Castroneves, where he grabbed the camera where he was being interviewed and screamed 24 hours at his competitor to remind him that it was maybe a bit early to take on such a move.
Scurry's finally made his way to the apron as we look at the battle for 7. The prototypes, Gruber and Puteklis are close once again. Gruber, a very quiet run today for him in this race today.
Very quiet run for Gruber, actually. A driver that we've seen featuring inside the top 5 in many series is arguably having a little bit of an off day, I would say, today.
Turning to the majors, came off a win in the majors 24, had 2 more 24-hour race wins with Torque Freak Racing back in 2020. Known to be competitive both in the road courses and the oval tracks, hoping to show consistency, his team says, throughout the different disciplines this season. Keep in mind, as this fight continues amongst these drivers, back and forth, Gruber defending. Back on the ice side, though, making the move as Kinetic Racing Machine with the pole. So, back and forth for these cars. You see a bit of smoke coming up. That's one of the other cars blocking it up. All while Sam Harper's lead has been reduced to about 5 seconds between him and Mickey.
So yeah, Mickey, he's really laying down that pace. It's now actually less than 4 seconds, so it's going to yo-yo back and forward with the traffic, but Eric Mickey's the one who's going to have to put all the risk on the line, and this is where that... now, guys, do we remember? Forgive me, I can't remember. Did Harper take tyres at any point during this race?
I don't believe that he did. I think he's done the entire race on a single set.
That could prove critical.
Very critical. Let's take a look at Mickey in particular. Remember, 1 stint fresher tires. He is on the double stint at the moment on those tires. And that in turn has led to a pace of 3/10 quicker a lap, Christian.
Yeah, and he's getting actually a little bit of help from a team car right now. It's RSR in front of him in the GTE class, and it's just towing him along down the straights and allowing him to pull up on Sam Harper.
Take a look at the lap comparison. In fact, you can see this the past 5, and look at that. 1 second, half a second, 1 second, 8/10, 3/10. It's swinging more and more and more in Mickey's direction, even as you see the fall off reaching the 145s.
Yeah, look at this. Eric Mickey's got a fantastic draft behind this Porsche 911 RSR GTE car in front, which actually doesn't seem to be pulling away from him, so he's obviously maybe carrying a little bit of damage, as that Porsche should be in the class ahead, should be pulling away, no problem. But Eric Mickey's he's certainly been the man with the fastest car. He's been he's been getting the most pace out of it, but a little mistake early on is going to prove, well, certainly proving pivotal at this stage, but might have saved it with that controversial strategy with the tyres.
And as traffic goes on through here, keep in mind that Kirk Crum is only reaching 170 on the corner exits at the moment. So that's going to be something to keep an eye with this, as now only a couple car lengths, about 15 between them and the race lead. So that's going to intensify in the next couple laps. 12 minutes on the clock. Dallas Pataska still holding on by 12 seconds, Christian. After having some of the mistakes early on, he is right now in a spot where, as long as he doesn't make any other mistakes, he can go back-to-back in this event, in this class.
Yeah, I think at this point he's got enough in hand that Thieneson isn't going to be challenging him. I'm actually surprised that Thieneson isn't able to close up to him. Obviously, we saw Pataska was able to close up to him when this situation was reversed in the sense of tires. But yeah, Dallas Pataska definitely looks like he's in a commanding position right now.
Tim Claeson's, meanwhile, by the way, as well, Peter should say, is doing a really good job too.
He's doing a superb job, yeah, just managing that gap beautifully. It's hardly moved at all, just sitting around the 7-second mark. They've both edged away a little bit from Harrod in the leading Porsche, but great drive there from Pete Harrod in the Porsche, because it just seems that the Corvettes have maybe just got a minor edge. The Porsche's got a fantastic chassis. Now, I was speaking to Kevin Estra, one of the Porsche factory drivers, on Thursday morning, and he was saying, you know, with their car, it's got such a good chassis, but because of that, they get penalised quite a lot with the BOP from a straight line speed perspective to try and even the lap time out. So here at Daytona, that's of course not going to help you.
See blinking lights as some of the traffic goes on by. The LMP2 battle, by the way, is broken up a little bit for P7. Pateklis has broken the draft just about from Gruber. That's after some of the time picked up with some of the traffic this lap for the Kinetic Europe Pro Team. Kinetic Racing, always known for coming away with race victories. Christian, you've had experience with Kinetic in the past.
Yeah, and Zhao is obviously an extremely good driver. I remember when we were running the IR18s at Detroit, and he was definitely the quickest of us when we were practicing, and I'm a little bit disappointed for him today. Obviously started 6th, and he is running 6th, but had that incident early on that he's had to recover from, and unfortunately for him, he's just never really had the opportunity to try and challenge for the victory or even a top 3 or top 5 here. So no. I don't think he's going to be too happy with how this race has gone, but I think he's showing some good pace right now, and he's done a great job recovering.
Absolutely, especially since he was as far back as dead last in the class after that first lap incident. Harper and Mickey are getting close. It's now within 5 to 7 car lengths. The teamwork car from Bombshell Racing Team is finally led on by Ryan Mayer. So now it's all between Harper and Mickey for the final 9 minutes for the GT3.
Yeah, slightly controversial circumstances there. Maybe perhaps a bit of team cooperation. I wonder what the organisers will think of that one, but never mind for now. We're into the last 10 minutes of the race. Eric Mickey is in the draft range of Sam Harper, and I think this is where that ever so slightly fresher amount of
Ryan Mayer again between them.
Ryan Mayer going past in the Porsche now. Watch this down into turn 1. This is very, very interesting indeed. The Porsche is going to try and hang it around the outside. Seems a strange time to come out with a huge burst of pace all of a sudden.
He was clutch and coasting for half a straightaway before the bus stop. So things are getting dicey now, and very intriguing now. Mickey now looking to try and retake the race lead in this class. Estimated 5 to go for these drivers this time by, as now Ryan Mayer has ran away from these cars. Mickey poking to the outside, going for the switch. No, a bit of a bobble on the entry. Yeah,
I don't think that Sam Harper is going to be too happy about what's been going on here. And I've got to be honest and say I think rightfully so, really. We shouldn't really be seeing cars in faster classes towing another team car along from another class. I don't really think that that's fair sportsmanship, if I'm brutally honest about it. But still, we've got 7 minutes and 45 seconds to go, and I think that Sam Harper can still probably hold Eric Mickey off here.
Yeah, it's going to need some big-time defense. There is still a lot of traffic through Mike Golightly, who's had a adventure and a half today. Brian Barney still having to reach these cars. Also could be a factor here. So this could break up some of the opportunities by about a lap or so. There goes Golightly now to the outside. Barney may reach these cars by turn 1. Yalva Verde may reach these cars by the exit of the infield. But Mickey wants the pole now. 7 minutes to go. Mickey to the outside for Bombshell Racing Team. Inside line for Sam Harper for Missed Apex. Side by side. Mickey on the deeper brakes. Harper with the preferred groove. Harper, though, with a better line going through the kink through turn 2. Once again to the Rodriguez International Horseshoe as Mickey now with the preferred line of the switchback. Mickey takes the race lead with 5 estimated laps to go, coming to 4.
Yeah, watch out though, because as they come up towards the kink in the West Horseshoe, Harper will now be in the draft of Mickey. So let's have a look and see what effect that will have when they get up onto the high banks. Will that allow Harper to get back by? Got to think those tyres are absolutely shot, and also you got to think that he's pretty miffed about that slightly, to be honest, questionable tactics. I have to completely agree with Christian's viewpoint on that one. Not the best sportsmanship, really, but that's really hurt Harper there. The prototype's coming through. That's just killed his momentum slightly, and maybe just lost the best of the draft there.
Yeah, but you have to think there's the chance of a counterpoint back for Mickey to lose the draft right on back, or lose some time rather on back. 7/10 still the gap between Sam Harper and Eric Mickey. 4 laps this time estimated. Under 6 minutes on the clock. Harper a little bit quicker into the bus stop that time, but had to really back it off on the apex.
I think he's looking like he's right on the limit of the draft right here. He'll be lucky to pull up to the back of Mickey as they get down to turn 1.
See. Really trying to wheel it up. 170 miles an hour again on the corner exit for him. Mickey just reached 170 at the pit lane entry. Not close enough. Already still 5 car lengths the difference on tires.
Yeah, just that was proved critical, and just it was almost as if it was a bit of an insurance policy for Eric Mickey, because you know, he had such a good advantage. He clearly had good pace, and maybe thought he could afford doing that and have a slightly more raceable car at the end. But we've got to love this tenacity from Harper as they prototype up on the side. Oh my goodness me, but gets back on the track cleanly, thankfully. But that's just taking Eric Mickey's eye off a little bit, and Harper's on him.
That was Henry Bennett off the racetrack. That has opened up the door a little bit with that. Harper has now gained some time back in the braking zone, and now Puteklis and Bennett both have to pass by. George Gruber could reach these cars soon. Puteklis waiting until the NASCAR oval, though, to make the move. That could help the Missed Apex car.
Yeah, looks like it has. So traffic gives and traffic takes away. It was just 1 lap ago where Harper didn't quite get the rub of the green there, and it just forced him out a little bit. But as they head down towards the bus stop, maybe 3 laps to go, I presume, for these guys. So it's still all to play for here, and it's going to come down. It's that close that it could come down to a little shuffle out in the traffic. And Sam Harper doing a great job, I say, tenacious performance to hang on to the back of Mickey here with tyres that are way past their best and still hanging on the back bumper.
2 BMWs had a stellar fight in these closing stages. Harper was running through much of the day before strategy came into play, and now he looks to try and break on through. Eric Mickey tries to defend along the yellow line still. Now 4 car lengths the difference as here comes more of the prototypes. Dallas Pataska potentially could reach these cars by the exit of the infield this lap, with 3 estimated to go for these cars.
And Harper looks like he's really kind of sliding around a little bit through turn 1 there, but still doing a great job to hold on the back of Eric Mickey. As we see Dallas Pataska closing up, he's going to be alongside Harper surely through the kink here, probably clearing Mickey by the second horseshoe.
And yes, indeed, Harper gives some space. This could go towards the direction of Harper in the right timing, though. Bit of a tap on the brakes from Pataska as Mickey has to sacrifice the bottom. Harper just sent it hard as Pataska nearly sent it even harder.
Yeah, Pataska getting on the marbles there as well. You saw that once he was on them, the car just didn't want to turn. And that just took Mickey's eye off the ball slightly. And that should allow Harper to get a bit of a run off onto the banking, which is critical to get the best out of that draft. So we're riding on board with this front engine inline 6 turbocharged M4 GT3. Still a prototype at this stage. An amazing, absolutely amazing project to develop the car here on iRacing before it hits the real world racetrack. Fantastic stuff. You can see the Fanatec design steering wheel there as well. But it's BMW versus BMW, no BOP concerns here. And I have to say, guys, I certainly wouldn't have called it B2 BMWs fighting for the lead. If I was going to say it was two of the same manufacturer, I would have called the Lambo, I'll be honest.
Yeah, the Lambos are currently third on back at the moment, but these BMWs have been able to set the tempo in the closing stages, especially Mickey, who has been a dominant car all day, despite several incidents and differences on pit strats. Here comes some more prototypes. To the outside, that time it's Colin Martzoff. 2 estimated laps to go that time by. And they have a lot of space. No cars expected to reach them this lap.
Okay, well, they've got a little bit of luxury to have a straight fight here then. Eric Mickey, he's going to be under a lot of pressure there as well. Don't forget, he had that little bit of contact there with the Team Mad car of Makovic. And got away with that one for sure, but Harper's still right on him, hanging on. Those tires must be on the threads.
And there's some more traffic there, right there. Tom Drailing actually gaining a ton of time on him. At least 15 to 30 car lengths as the lights blink for Sam Harper. That lost Harper some time. As a result, Mike Dinesen has again reached these cars again. As now, Harper inside, so does Mickey to that line. The prototypes drive by, and now these drivers expecting the white flag this time by, and what has been an intriguing one. Dallas Pataska has controlled the tempo much of the way in the prototypes. He now is expecting the white flag this time, but 30 seconds on the clock with a ton of traffic to negotiate for this final circuit. Claude Belval gives some space. Ryan Mayer now gives some space. Sakowicz and Henry Bennett along with George Gruber potentially could all get lapped in this white flag time around.
Yeah, so we're going to go into a little bit of overtime here. So if there's anyone who's really scared on fuel, they're going to be hoping they're following Dallas Pataska home. They won't want to go any longer than they have to. But this is when you're the prototype leader, that's not what you want to see. White flag, but then a whole bunch of GT cars to worry about. But Dallas Pataska, there's been a little worries here and there, but this has been a really, really streaky but fun drive.
Tim Claeson's just behind him, just passed by Eric Mickey, which made things interesting now a little bit for Sam Harper. A little bit diciness there, but Claeson's has also had a very clean drive today, Peter, as he now looks to run with some clean space, while Harper wants to keep the contest going by 1.1 seconds behind Mickey.
Yep, not giving up. Proper tenacity there from Sam Harper. It's been an amazing drive, and yeah, I think when he looks at the broadcast back, he'll be pretty disappointed with what happened there at the end. But here's Dallas Pataska coming through the bus stop for the last time, JP, and what a drive it's been.
He'll get through the last of some of the traffic here as 2-3 wide on his final time around. Bennett gives space, but for Dallas Pataska, for Satellite Racing, he'll go back-to-back. The VRS Satellite Racing car gets to celebrate. It's Pataska who wins the Daytona 2.4 for the prototypes by more than 14 seconds. From Tim Claeson's, meanwhile, a return back to form for Grizzly TFR Daytona. It was here where the partnership blossomed and started off with a checker flag in this respective class. Today, it's Tim Claeson's who will carry the flag and bring Grizzly TFR Daytona to the checkered flag. He wins at Daytona. All while Eric Mickey closes things off with an incredible drive for Bombshell Racing Team. He wins in the GT3s.
What a thrilling finish there in that GT3 category as well. Just impossible to call right there at the end. But in GTE as well, those two Corvettes, Tim Clayton's and Ross Banfield, absolutely flawless. Just 4 seconds between them at the line. And Pete Harrod, the top of the Porsches, what a great drive from him as well. To get on the podium, no mistakes, but these two Corvettes were just too good.
What a race indeed. And the rest of the field still continuing to cross the way across the stripe, Christian. What a finish.
Yeah, I would say we definitely saw some great battles, especially throughout the GT classes, both of them. As we said, with the GTE cars, realistically, those top three just drove around together the entire time. And obviously, an interesting strategy by Eric Mickey to take tires, and I think he was vindicated by that. Obviously, had that incident early on go against him, and a little bit of a question mark regarding team strategy towards the end of the race, but I don't think that takes anything away from his performance itself. I think he was clearly the quickest GT3 driver today and absolutely deserved the win.
With that, we'll take a step aside. Post-race coverage coming up in just a few moments. You're watching the Global Sim Racing channel for coverage of the major series in the European region for the Daytona 2.4. Welcome back to the virtual Daytona International Speedway for coverage of the Daytona 2.4 for the major series in its European region here on GSRC in support of the Wounded Warrior Project. Overall, it was an interesting race to say the very least, from start to finish, from strategy to intrigue to drama and great finishes. It's Dallas Pataska, though, who takes home the overall and prototype victory today by 14 seconds over Mike Thienessen. Then Andrei Rechkovic finished in third. Wolf, Romner, Valverde rounded out the top six. Puteklis finishes in seventh. The last car on the lead lap was George Gruber in eighth. Shane Norton, very quiet race today, finished in 9th, first car 1 lap down after starting 14th. David Barriclow rounded out the top 10 today. Then it is David Malneric who finished in 11th, Richie Hearn 12th after some struggles in the pit stop cycles. Henry Bennett 13th, with Ettore Galeno finishing 14th. Barney and Martzov rounded up the finishers in the class. The drivers who finished several laps down in the class were Mike Golightly, Tom Drelling, Travis Henderson, Riley Thompson, and Dawson Brock today. The GTEs, meanwhile, Christian, were interesting.
Yeah, very close battle in the GTEs all day long, and Tim Claessens comes out on top of that, just ahead of Ross Banfield and Pete Harrod. The top three so tight together the entire race. Kurt Crum considerably further back in 4th place with Ryan Mayer, with that interesting strategy towards the end there in 5th place with Dick Miller in 6th, Darwin Mites in 7th, Rob Gall, Franco Scurry, who we saw have that interesting incident in the bus stop towards the end of the race, and finally rounding out the end of the class, Ray Partridge.
Then, when it came to the GT3s, things were intriguing to say the least. As talked about, Mike Golightly is that wedge between them, but Eric Mickey came away with the checkered flag, 9 laps the difference from the prototype winner. Sam Harper finished in 2nd, with Cordo Colon rounding out the podium for the class. Ryan Walker, David H. Baker, your top 5, finishing inside the top 35 overall on the board. Marcus Niskanen, Alex Sakowicz, who was in contention for the win much of the race, involved in trouble late, ends up finishing 34th. That was in that crash with Eric Mickey for the battle for what was, at the time, it turns out, net P2. Then, Belval, Favrovsky, and Bob Beltrami, the Salami, rounded out the entrants on that class. As mentioned, the rest of the drivers were all drivers several laps down. All of them were prototype competitors. An intriguing one to say the very least, and some drivers who are going to be very happy with some of the performances in this one. As Tim Claessens now standing by, get the chance to speak with him now, as Tim is your winner in the GTEs today. Tim, first things first, how does it feel to be a winner again in the Major Series?
Hi, good evening, guys. It's been a nice return after taking a break for, I think, 2 seasons from the Major Series. And we just kicked in the door and came in with a blast with this for this one. It was a really nice win.
What was the strategy like for you in that car, especially since you were really saving and really riding behind Ross Banfield that entire first stint? How big was that saving for the Strats today?
I think eventually the first stint sort of made a big part of the race. I see we drove away with three e-cars at the start, and I wanted to give myself a little bit room to play with, so I tried to work together really well with Ross to both save my own fuel and think about myself. But also, if we decided to do a little battle later on, it would just be the 2 of us and not 3 cars. Just makes it a little bit less complicated. And the second and third stints, the first stint really helped in the second and third stint, just by way of being able to drive longer on low fuel, but also just having to take less fuel in the last one and really compound that gap and make it a real solid lead.
Overall, how big is this for the organization, especially since Grizzly TFR started working together for this race last year, started off with success at the time with David Barriclow. Now that success continues for 2021 with you.
I think this is a good start to start both the cooperation and the season off. That's partly why I rejoined again, because I really liked the way we were having a nice team effort or team championship for this one. So I really want to get on the ground floor for that and really help both teams achieve some nice wins and maybe an overall victory in the end as well.
Now, next race is the 1987 Daytona 500. Your opinion and thoughts on racing in the 1987 cars at Daytona on the super speedway portion?
It's gonna take some practice for sure. It's not really something I'm very used to driving ovals in general, and especially those oval cars. They're a completely different sort of world in how you drive them and how they are driven around the oval parties. Even it's no longer the easy go flat out for 3 hours. So it's definitely gonna take some practice. But it's also, on the other hand, quite fun because it does mean it's a little bit less like pure setup dependent. because it isn't just be going flat out for a big part of the race. So I'm really looking forward to the challenge.
Anyone you want to thank for the run today?
Well, our beautiful car has all the sponsor on there: TFR Lab, Infinity Decals, and of course TeamSpeak for having some in-car communication. So those 3 sponsors, and of course the rest of my team. We really started building the setup already for the preparation for next week, of course. So it was a good start.
Congratulations on the class victory today, Tim.
Thanks a lot, and have a good night, guys.
Tim Clayson's coming away with the victory today over Ross Banfield and Peter Rod in the GTEs. Meanwhile, in the GT3s, it was Eric Mickey who gets to speak with Christian Challoner, who I believe has a lot of questions for him.
That I definitely do. But first off, let's start with a lot of the good things that happened in that race, Eric. You clearly look like you were the fastest GT3 driver. I have absolutely no doubt about that. You managed to make that strategy of taking tires work when realistically I thought that you'd actually lost the race at that point. Can you kind of talk us through why you made that decision to take tires? Because I felt like you had enough pace in hand that you didn't really need to take the risk of dropping back into the pack like that.
So I have pretty limited experience, particularly over the last couple years in GT3s. But the last time I tried to go a full race without taking tires, it went really bad at the end. So I'm a little gun shy of that call. And I just kind of felt like what worked last year was probably best to stick to. So I just decided that it was better to just take the tires, knowing that the tire wear on that opening stint was going to be worse. As the track would rubber in later, and then do the extra turned out to be about 33 minutes or so on without taking the tires later. So I just kind of committed to that strategy and was driving myself crazy, wondering if it was the right thing to do for the entire middle to end of the race.
It definitely looked like it made it a little bit more difficult for you. Obviously, at the beginning of the race, you kind of checked out on the field. You had about a 3-second advantage, and then you got caught up a little bit by an LMP2 car, lost all that advantage, but you were able to get back to the front. And then we saw you have that pretty great battle, actually, with Sakovic in the 8 car for really a great number of laps, and he was doing a great job. And when you guys came side by side out of turn 1, I felt like that was a purely racing incident, because from my side, you had overlap on him, you were there. You mind talking about kind of how difficult it was to pass and what led you to, because that's a pretty risky part of the track to make a move. Was that kind of really your only shot at getting by him, do you think?
I don't know if it would have been my only shot. I think my tires being about an hour fresher than what he had, I think I potentially could have had another shot at it, but we were also losing a lot of time to Sam, who was up ahead, and I could tell just by the slight attempts that I made, the kind of trying to peek and see what I could possibly get done on him, that he was not going to make it easy to get around him. So when I saw him have that slip and I had that run, I got the call that I was on, that I had a car on my left side. I went back and looked at the replay. When the contact occurred, and it was left front tire to right rear. So in my opinion, like he should have been aware that I was there, and particularly given the situation, all things considered, what we were racing for there and how we were racing. I think that, I think it's ultimately a racing incident myself. I think he should have known that I was going to have to take any opportunity I got, and that was the one that happened. So I just had to do it. And, if it's protested, then we'll go through that whole process and deal with that as it is. But looking back, knowing that I actually had the overlap that I thought I had, I feel comfortable with the decision I made.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like you were definitely there, and you were up on the curb when the contact happened. So from my side, I think that was definitely just a racing deal. You guys were going at it pretty hard for a good number of laps, and there'd been a little bit of contact in the bus stop before then, but I think it was just a case of it was just close racing, and unfortunately for Sakovic, it went badly for him, and he got turned into the fence. Now, once you were up into that second spot, you obviously had that gap to run down to Sam Harper, who'd come out well ahead of you guys after that last pit stop. And I have to say, there was one moment where it looked like you had a team car actually towing you along. And was that was that actually a plan that was happening? Was there something else going on with that RSR? Because the RSR is 10 to 20 kilometers an hour faster down the straight. From my side, there's no way that you should have been able to keep up with him.
He didn't have anything, or he felt like he didn't have anything left to gain in the race without a mistake anyway, taking out, I think it was Pete Harrod ahead of him. And, the whole goal is team points, best finish possible, rack up whatever we can. And so that I didn't think that I had the pace at that point from the state of my tires to run down Sam. That was a decision that was made to try to help me close the gap. And as soon as I think it was Ryan, our other teammate, got to 5 seconds behind Kurt said he was going to take off, so that he didn't have to give up position to Ryan, and because he's going for the drivers, points. But he, that was the decision that was made, and we are not aware that that type of thing would be. I know there's obviously people who prefer or not prefer it, but I don't think there's any rules about something that we did. We didn't really interrupt anybody's race. It was just a strategic call that we made because using the cars we had on the track.
I definitely think it will prove to be a controversial move. I know from my side, I did understand it from a team play aspect, but at the same time, I felt it was definitely the very, very limits of what I would consider to be sporting, if I'm brutally honest with you. But hey, I do think that you had the pace to win the race regardless of that, and I think considering some of the incidents that did happen to you that set you back, I don't really think it takes anything away from it. I just think it's probably going to be a controversial point in the Majors Discord, and I suspect that we're going to see a lot of conversation about that. But obviously, it sets you off in a good position for the championship with the class win, and next time out, 1987 cars back here at Daytona. Not on the old track, unfortunately, as disappointing as that is to me personally. But still, I think that should be pretty fun. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
I'm really looking forward to that. I was a big proponent of that race being the Daytona 500 using those cars this year to change it up from the other cars. I think they're going to be a handful enough to on the smooth track versus having to put them on the old track. So I'm all right with that decision. But yeah, as far as the team orders thing go, the conversations can be had. People can talk to me if they want to talk to me. If it's against the rules somewhere that we're not aware of, then fair enough. We'll deal with that. We'll take whatever the necessary action would be for that. We're out there trying to win a team championship because that's kind of where our best efforts are. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm comfortable with the moves that were and decisions that were made today. Otherwise, barring any rule infractions that I just wasn't aware of that we shouldn't have been doing. So, I'm okay with other people disagreeing and just move on to Daytona and see how things go.
Okay, well, we'll definitely take a look at that, and thank you for coming in and chatting with us.
That was Eric Mickey, and we have an update coming in from the Team Mad representatives from both the driver and one of their team principals. They will not be protesting the incident with Eric Mickey, and I quote from Sakowicz, "Just happens, we've done on this pace, and I think and all he deserves the result." Ross Banfield's now standing by. Ross, how are you feeling about a strong run for you in your class today?
Pretty good. Wanted first, but I'm happy with second. It's a good way to start off the season.
Now, want to talk to you about what happened in the middle stints, what happened pace-wise there, especially the different strategy-wise compared to you and Tim.
So it was a little bit of the X factor of multi-class racing. It seemed like I was getting kind of overtaken by some aggressive LMP2s at the kink, and he was getting caught at the straight. So while I was reeling him in, maybe like 2 seconds, I'll lose 3 seconds to someone dive bombing like 2 laps in a row. And the draft really kind of hurt me in the end because that 3-second gap he got at the beginning of the first stint happened to be the exact same gap that he finished the win with.
Indeed. Next race, Daytona. Your thoughts on racing the 1987 cars?
I'm looking forward to it. It's definitely different from what we've done historically here at the majors, so it should be fun. And like you said, it's not really a setup car. It's more of a driver's car. And without the restrictor plate, it should be interesting seeing how the cars are going to be drifting all along the track.
Anyone you want to thank for the run today?
Yeah, there's the guys over at UDocs. Really good team atmosphere over there. Kind of helped with the setup. We kind of picked and planned some strategies, which really helped. I don't think I would have ended as P2 or even fighting for the lead potentially if it wasn't for the strategies. So shout out to them.
Congratulations on the run today, Ross.
Yes.
Ross Banfield second in the GTEs today, while meanwhile Ryan Walker, one of the talking points of the day, finished in the top 5 today in the GT3s. He's standing by with Christian.
Ryan looked like a pretty good run today. Obviously, one of the faster Lamborghinis out there, and you had a good strategy. You made it work. Came away with the top 5. Got to be happy with that, right?
Yeah, my first race in the majors. That's better than I hoped for. And yeah, I was in contention for a podium, but unfortunately made a mistake in turn 1, just over the bump, and lost the rear, but managed to get going and finished in P4. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that for my first race in the series, in the major series.
Yeah, it definitely looked like it was pretty tight for that P3, and I know how kind of disappointing that is to lose out on that by just the tiny margin that you did realistically over the 2.4 hours to only be within 2 seconds at the flag. So that's unfortunate, but at the same time, as you say, you kind of went into this with not really any expectation, right? And you executed a good strategy, and there was a couple of drivers out there who made the decision to take tires within the race. What were your kind of thoughts on that? Do you think that it was necessary to take tires? Do you think that those guys had an advantage because of it? Or do you think it was pretty even, or maybe even detrimental to not take a set of tires?
I think it just depends how, I think anyway, it just depends how hard you are on the tires. If you punish them or really aggressive, I find I'm not really an aggressive type when it comes to tires and just abusing them. So yeah, I just decided to not take tyres, and I found it actually worked. And the difference with not changing, I found the tyres actually lasted for quite a long time and could last easily 2 stints. So I found anyway it was the correct decision not to take tyres, but other people seem to still benefit from taking them. So I don't think there was a massive difference, but I found anyway for strategy, I found it was the correct decision not to change.
Well, I definitely agree with that, and I don't mind saying it, but that's definitely my plan for the race later on tonight, to not take tires and to go the full distance without a tire change. I feel like it's the best in terms of track position, and I feel like it's on pace. It's actually probably the quicker way as well. Now, a lot of traffic out there tonight, obviously a lot of P2s out there. Did that kind of make it a challenging race in terms of dealing with those guys? And obviously it's the responsibility of the faster car to make their way around you, but we both know that sometimes you have to make sacrifices with the line and whatnot to avoid being in an incident or to actually kind of facilitate the passes themselves. And can you kind of talk us through how you deal with that?
When it comes to getting lapped by the faster class cars, especially the P2s, I just keep telling myself, don't panic, just do my thing, and they'll find a way around, and don't do anything too hasty, like move offline. Just stay online and just make it predictable that you're staying online, and you'll make it easy for them to get by. So it seemed to work, and also it seemed to help as well with fuel saving in the first stint, because I was able to save enough to do, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 laps extra, but it worked out. And yeah, everyone seemed to be fairly good when it came to being lapped. And there was a few close calls, but that's just the sort of thing you expect in multi-class racing.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about the fuel mileage. Obviously, that was something that we saw a lot of drivers trying to extend out to. And yeah, you did a great job extending out those stints, and you were rewarded with the 4th place. And well, next time out, 87 cars, we wish you the best of luck, and thank you for coming and chatting with us.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the broadcast.
Again, that was Ryan Walker. I'd like to thank him, Tim Claessens, along with Eric Mickey and Ross Banfield for taking the time to speak with us. Very quickly, Christian, you mentioned it yourself. Coming up is the Americas region race. Your thoughts for that one, for those drivers in this one, and then for the 1987s for everyone else after?
Well, I feel like the caliber of field is very similar between the Americas region and the European region, especially for this race, with it being essentially a road course race and one that everybody has done a lot of practice for, no matter what discipline you're from. So I think we should expect to see a very similar race there. Obviously, strategy played a big role in the European race, and I think it will definitely play a big role in the Americas region race as well. The 87 car at Daytona is a completely different beast from what people are used to with the modern series car. Obviously, the modern car, you can run very, very closely. You can run 2, 3, sometimes even 4 wide quite safely. You definitely can't do that with the 87 car, and I think we should expect to see some people caught out by that, especially drivers who aren't familiar with that type of vehicle.
On that note, we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's exciting action from Daytona, and like to thank the Major Series for organizing this amazing series. We'd also like to thank the companies who provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed up on screen. With additional thanks to Jude Warner provides her wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. I'd like to thank the team today once again, and Peter, Christian, and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. Like to support the channel, you can check the merchandise for sale at gsrc.stormby.com, or check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. Don't forget to head over to our YouTube page and hit that big red subscribe button, as well as the notification bell, so don't miss a moment at the Global Sim Racing Channel. As talked about before, the next race is going to be a wild one. It is the 1987 Daytona 500. That takes place February 21st, 2021. Be sure to tune in. Coverage starts 11:45 p.m. or a.m. Eastern Time, 5:45 p.m. GMT. Also, keep in mind that the Majors has its American region race coming up at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time on GSRC. For the pro side, ESPN for the sportsman's class. Be sure to tune in for those races. It's going to be a fun one to start off their campaigns tonight. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on your screen, so check those out and mark them down your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.